Hey, comrades, what's up? It's time for ReZero. I have had this sitting around as something to watch because I heard it was good, but it can take so much isekai stuff at a time. But I kind of forgot I had it lying around on one of my drives. But we just watched Isekai Quartet, the first two seasons over the last. When is this going to broadcast? Like last month at some point. And I was like, oh, ReZero. I've never seen that show. This looks pretty funny. And I've had a lot of close contact with it, mostly through Isekai Quartet, but also they did a crossover. What do you call them? They did a collab with Nikkei Goddess of Victory when I first started playing that. So I have a vague understanding of some of the characters, particularly the half-elf Amelia, Rem and Ram, the demon twins, and some of the other kind of side characters as well from those two other enterprises. So I'm not going to this totally blind like I would otherwise, but that being said, I have no idea what happens in this show or powers or anything. I know his powers have something to do with death starting out, but we'll get to it. All right, so episode 1 is an hour-long episode, or 47 minutes or whatever it is with the commercial breaks and whatnot. Excuse me. What my deal is. We get introduced to Subaru. He's in a Japanese convenience store buying some stuff, and he hears a crazy voice, and he feels like he's seeing things or whatever, and he's like, that's weird. And then he walks out, and he's thinking about eating his cup of noodle, or his fancy Japanese cup of noodle when he gets back to his room. And then he walks out to the street by the convenience store, and instead of getting mowed over by truck Chan or whatever, he just blinks, and now he's been isekai'd instantaneously to this other world. So he's there's all sorts of crazy things there, and he starts wandering around. He's like, all right, I got superpowers. He has no money. Well, he has his Japanese money, which doesn't work, and so he's broke. And then he tries to use magic. That he doesn't have magic. He doesn't have any powers. So there's no cute girl to introduce him to the isekai world. It's very kind of on the nose about oh, isekai, yeah, I've read plenty of stories like this. This is awesome. I'm the hero and whatnot, and he has nothing. And then he ends up in an alleyway where he's just kind of thinking about stuff because he got pushed over into a lake at some point, or not a lake, the kind of river that goes through this huge capital town he's in. And some thugs walk up and they want all this stuff, and he's like, no. And so he punches one guy out pretty much, and the other guy pulls some blades on him, and then they beat the shit out of him. And then at some point, this blonde-haired thief who we've seen running around in some other scenes comes in, and she's like, oh, and they're like, oh, and then she's like, I gotta go, and then she just leaves, and she says something like, "The power be with you," or something, which comes up again later, which is the only reason I bring it up. I can't remember exactly what she says. And then they're like, okay, cool. So they start beating him up some more. And then this other girl shows up, and she's like, what are you guys doing? I need my thing. And they're like, we don't have your thing. That's some blonde chick who ran through here. And she's like, okay, sounds good. And you don't care we're beating up this guy? And she's like, no, it has nothing to do with me. And then they're like, well, we're going to beat you up too. And she's like, oh yeah? And she shoots him with magic. And then Puck shows up. Puck is her little mascot character. It's a little kind of cat dragon thing, in Lunar Silver Star story, only less dragon and more cat. And they're like, oh, you're a sus user. And she's like, that's right, you better leave me alone. And they're like, all right, yeah, we'll leave you alone. And she's like, and leave that guy alone. And they're like, no. And so she chases them off with magic and spirit stuff. And then she has an argument with Puck about helping Subaru out or not. And eventually she decides that she's going to do it. And he wakes up on her lap, but it's actually the cat's lap. And then they chit chat for a little bit. And she's like, I have one question to ask you. Do you know where this thing is? Okay, cool. I healed you, but my one payment was to have you answer a question, and you answer the question. So that's all I need. And then she kind of runs off, and then Puck's and Subaru have a conversation about her and kind of pretending not to be caring, and how she pretend, essentially she likes to help people, but she likes to pretend that she doesn't like to help people because she's got some serious baggage or whatever. Anyway, Subaru kind of gets it, and so he runs after her and says, I'm going to help you. And she's like, well, you don't owe me anything. And he's like, I don't want to do it because you owe me anything. I want to do it because I want to help you, and I like helping people. And she's like, all right. So then they wander around and ask and look for this insignia, or who could possibly have it or whatnot. And at some point, they see this little girl who looks lost, and she's crying. And we don't know her name yet. But the elf girl, or the silver-haired girl, goes up to help her, and then Subaru's goes, and then she really freaks her out because she's bad with people, I guess. And then Subaru rolls up because he's a neat, and he does some ridiculous coin magic trick. Oh, we also find out at some point that he works out all the time. He's a shut-in, but he's a shut-in that likes to keep good in shape for whatever crazy shonen anime reason. And so that's why he could beat up that guy, why he's strong generally. So with that being said, what goes on here? Okay. And so he does the trick. The girl trusts him. They go walking. They find her mother. She's so happy, and they're like, okay, bye. And so they keep looking, and eventually it becomes like evening time. And then they're chatting, and at some point Puck's like, hey, we never introduced each other to ourselves. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Subaru Nasakai or whatever. And then he's like, I'm Puck. And they give each other like high fives or shake hands. And then the silver girl's like, I'm Satella, I think is what she calls herself. And it's nice to meet you, Satella. And then Puck gives her like a look, because obviously that's not her name. And we know it's not her name because I played Nikki Got Us a Victory collab and watched Sky Quartet. So, she's very shady about it. But anyway, they end up in the slums, and then they end up finding somebody. Oh, no. They end up back with the guy, the market seller, who like, oh, I didn't even mention this. I'm sorry. This is like super important. So at some point, he's like looking at fruit, and there's a fruit stand guy, and he's like telling him about like the apples, and he calls them appas because fuck, why not? And then, he's like, get out of here, you're broke. And then she's like and then they're asking him if he knows anything about this girl, and he's like something, and then it reveals that she's also broke, and he's like, get the fuck out of here. And then we see like the mom and the little girl they rescued earlier, and they come running up because dun-da-da, of course, this is the dad of the little girl. And then he's like, oh, you saved my daughter? That's excellent. Yeah, I'll tell you whatever you want. So he tells them about the girl. Her name is like Felt, and she's probably over in like the slums area, and they like thank him so much, and he's like, no, thank you for taking care of my daughter, and here's some fruit or whatever. So they head to the slums. It's like really sad and slummy, and they see like orphan children standing there very quietly. And then eventually they find somebody who reveals that the Felt is probably over at Master Rom's house, who lives over there. He's like a treasure house. And so once they get there, Subaru's like, I'm gonna go in and talk to this guy and see if we can get your insignia back, and we'll go from there. And you wait here. And so he heads inside, and it's super dark. And he's like, oh, that's funny. Someone just left all these treasures unguarded. And then he sees a dead body. And he's like, the fuck? And then this woman's like, aha, and like stabs him in the back or whatever. And then Amelia comes in, and she's like, no, run, as he's like dying on the ground. And then she gets like stabbed in the back, and then he reaches out to her hand, and then the whole thing goes dark, and it goes rah, rah, rah. And then he's like talking to the fruit seller again, because get it, that's what that means. So let's take a moment. The thing is like a whole genre, and I think it actually came out of Korea first. Maybe it is a Japanese thing, but if I remember correctly, I think it's more of like a South Korean concept. So there's like isekai, right, which is like another world, and then the is like redo. And so there's like a whole genre, which is like tons of different stuff where people like die and redo, or like get reborn and redo, or like they power up essentially from resurrecting and whatnot. And that's what the stands for, or reincarnation or whatever. And so obviously that's what this is, because the show is called ReZero. And so he's like born again, and he's like, oh, wait, what's happening? I gotta go find out. Oh, I gotta help the Silver Hill. I gotta help Satella. And so he like runs straight off to like Master Rom's house, and is banging on the door. And then this old barbarian guy like opens the door. He's like, what? And he's like, I'm looking for the Silver Hill girl. And he's like, I have no fucking clue what you're talking about. And so they chit chat for a little bit, and they hang out. And then eventually he's like, well, I need the insignia. And he's like, oh, the insignia? Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I don't have one. And he's like, well, maybe it's coming later. And he's like, oh, is Felt bringing it? And he's like, oh, you know Felt? Yeah, she's bringing it. You can talk to her and you can negotiate. And he's like, all right. So he waits around. Eventually Felt, the thief girl, the blonde girl, shows up. And he's like, hey, I want the insignia. And she's like, okay, sounds good. Let's go inside. So they go inside, and they drink like some milk. And I think it's legitimately milk, because even the subtitle is like milk. Because sometimes they'll say like milk when they translate stuff over, because localizers are assholes for the most part, and we need AI to localize stuff. But anyway, because it'll actually do an honest job and not be an asshole about it. And I welcome our future robot overlords, to be completely honest. I feel like they're going to be much more honest and earnest, and not be duplicitous and assholes with their own agendas. They're just going to like, here you go, here's your slop, human. Anyway, and I welcome the slop. Anyway, we what's going on? Okay, so they start chit-chatting, and then she's like, oh, someone already offered me 10 royal coins, or holy coins, I think it's holy coins, for the 10 holy coins for the insignia. And so what do you got? And he's like, well, I have this cell phone, which I can take a picture, and let me show you what a picture is. Isn't this awesome? It freezes moments in time. And they're like, wow, it's a Matia. What's Matia? Matia are like magic-infused devices for people who don't have gates open. Gates open, all right. So if you have gate open, you must be able to use magic. Got it. Okay, thank you, game. Thank you, show. Actually, very well-written way to like introduce concepts in the world without lower dumping. It's just like he's just like, someone asks a question, and they're like, yep, this is what it is. This is why isekai is so common, by the way, because it's so easy to write well. Right, it's almost like hard to write poorly in terms of like explaining the world, explaining the rules, explaining what's going on, because like the main character has no fucking clue what's going on, so someone has to explain it to him. And so as long as you don't like lore dump, as long as it's like drip fed, then it's like always pretty well. You know, you never feel like overwhelmed by what's going on or like confused as well. Okay. So Rom says that the cameras, like his cell phone, essentially they brought over with full battery, but like obviously no connection to the internet or to data. That his cell phone can it'll probably go for 20 holy coins. And she's like, wow, okay, cool. So, or more, right? So then they wait around. Eventually the lady shows up that killed him in like the other existence. But she's like, here just to make the deal for the insignia. And they're like, cool, sounds good. But like, and then Felt's like, hey, no offense to you, but this guy offered me like 20 holy coins essentially. What do you got? And she's like, I have 20 holy coins. And then Rom's like, well, I think the cell phone might actually be worth more. Like 20 holy coins is like a bare minimum. So it looks like you got outbid. And then he's like, Subaru does like a Fortnite dance or whatever, like celebrates. And then Felt's like, all right, here you go. And then all of a sudden, she felt like jumps. And the lady is like sipping milk, and she's like, well, I guess I lost. It's no fault of my own. My employer should have sent me with more money, because she's like the go-between. And then all of a sudden, Felt grabs Subaru and throws and like jumps with him against the wall, because she like tried to strike at him with a knife like super fast. And then Rom pulls out like his barbarian club or whatever, and they start fighting. And things are going pretty well for Rom, it seems. But then she finally like, gets him good. She like handicaps him and then stabs him real good. And Felt's like, holy shit. So she pulls out her daggers and tries to fight. She gets killed like real fast. And so it's just Subaru and her, and Subaru's like, fuck. And so he's like, all right. So he like goes to hit her and then gets kind of hit back, and then he goes to hit her again, and this time he like kicks her real hard in like the chest and knocks her back, and she's like all turned on by it and whatnot. But unfortunately for him, he did not move fast enough, and he got stabbed in the gut. And he's like, fuck. And then she's like laughing and talking about how excited she is and how he's gonna die slowly and all this stuff. And then he starts having like his crazy like death shake again, and then he like wakes up, and then the fruit seller's like, hey, what do you want? And it's like, because he went back in time, and he's like, what the fuck? And then he kind of passes out because he's like in shock, and then he gets woken back up by the fruit seller. He's like, hey man, you're okay? You can have some fruit for free, man. Like, I didn't realize you were in such a hard strait. And then Subaru sees the silver-haired girl, Satella, walking like down the street, and he's like, hold up. And he like, I don't need the fruit. And he runs after her, and he runs. He's like, hey, wait up, wait. And she turns, and he's like, Satella, I'm glad you're alive or something. And she's like, how dare you call me the name of the Witch of Envy? And he's like, Nani desu ka? That's episode 1. Things do not go well for accusing Emilia of being the witch. Everyone kind of like talks down to him, and then she wanders off, and then Subaru's trying to figure out what to do. But Felt runs up, grabs the icon or whatever, anyway, and then dashes off. And so then Subaru's trying to figure out what to do, and he's wandering around a little bit, and then he stumbles back into the alleyway where he gets killed by the guys, the friendly guys. So he's back, and then he's like, huh? Now he's like, hey, do you recognize me, old man? And the guy's like, no, you're just standing here like a crazy person. What's going on? And he's like, nothing. And so then he goes and he starts thinking about it, and he finally realizes he has the power to, like, he calls it time skip, where when he dies, he skips back in time to like a previous era or whatever, right? So it took 3 or 4 tries, and he finally like, figured it out. There's probably more to it than just that. That seems like way too simplified, and that doesn't seem exactly what's going on. But that's kind of roughly what's going on with that. So he continues. So then he wanders around and thinks about that. He comes back, asks the apple seller about the pickpocket that occurred, and he's like, oh yeah, some weird pickpocket thing occurred over there, something. So then he heads out, and he finally tracks down Felt's home. But on his way to track it down, he bumps into like the crazy assassin lady, and then she's like super creepy with him, like licking her lips and talking about how he smells like fear and something else and anger, and he's trying to like avoid contact with her, and she like touches his hand, and she's like, ooh, hoo, 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 and wanders off. Eventually he gets to Felt's house. She's standing there looking around at it, and then she shows up, and then she tries to attack him because why is he at her home, right? And he finally, like, she collapses her, like, shanty onto him, and he's like, no, wait, I want to buy your thing. Here, check out this picture thingy, blah, 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 blah. And he really tries to convince her not to go to Rom's house, but eventually they end up back over there. They have the same conversation, and then he's like, all right, cool, sounds good. You're definitely going to buy this thing, so let's go celebrate, and you can sell the thing for coins and whatnot. And then she's like, no, blah, 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 blah. And then there's a knock on the door, and Subaru's like, oh, what am I going to do? There's no way to change the future, blah, 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 blah. And so they go and open the door, and he's like, wait, she's going to kill you. And then it's like, dun, dun, dun. It's Emilia. And she's like, why would I kill you? I have no interest in that. And he's like, what? And that's the episode. Oh, also, I totally forgot. On this, let's see, third or fourth iteration here, when he again stumbles into the same alleyway for some insane reason. Instead of like attacking them or trying to run by them or fighting them, he just calls for the guards because he remembers from the previous time that they were afraid of the guards. and then no guards come. But then guess who shows up? Dun dun dun! Reinhardt. Reinhardt is named. The thugs are like, oh no, it's Reinhardt, the master swordsman, with his like dragon etched clawed sword. And they like they run off, and then Reinhardt is like super nice and friendly and like, oh ha ha ha, something something. That's be the two of us versus the three of them, could have beat them. And the Subaru's like, I'm worthless. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, they were scared of you only. And Reinhardt's like, ah, ha, ha, no, not really, ha. And he's like scratching the back of his head, right? So, like, the nervous anime thing, or he's clearly trying to hide something, is what my opinion is. And then he's like, cool, Subaru, we'll be friends. See you around. And he's like, all right, thanks, man. And then he tells Reinhardt at that point, hey, so I'm going to this place to get the icon. So if you see the silver-haired girl that's really pretty with, like, a white dress or whatever, just tell her that, like, don't go over there, right? So there you go. So now that Amelia's here, it's, I guess, time for everything to something. Anyway, so they go back and forth. She demands her insignia back from Flint. Flint, is that her name? Anyway, she yells at Subaru for betraying her or whatever, and Rom's just Rom's just standing there watching. And all of a sudden, Subaru sees like a glint of a knife, and he yells at Amelia to protect herself. So she does. Well, first she threatens everybody with like ice magic, and then he's like, watch out! And she creates a shield, and then like the devil girl, the assassin lady, she shows up and fights, and then her and Amelia start fighting, but mostly it's Puck, because Puck is like a spirit, and he's like easily handling her without like any problems whatsoever. But it's, it's getting later in the day, and at like 5 o'clock he's got to go take a little nap-potamus. So they're doing that. Rom, Flint, and Subaru are just kind of like watching this whole thing play out, and then eventually Puck's got to like go, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'm all tired and tucked out of mana. But he's like, hey, if you need your super move, just let me know, I'll pop back in. And she's like, I should be good, I shouldn't need it. So then Puck leaves, and then her and the ninja lady, assassin lady, start fighting some more. And at that point, Rom gets involved. He starts fighting, and then he gets like stabbed, and Flint starts fighting as well, and Subaru's just like watching this whole thing take place. Anyway, so she's so the two of them, or the three of them, are fighting while Subaru watches, and finally he's like, I gotta do something. So he starts fighting, and he makes a plan with Flint that she can get out of. We find out she's 15 and Subaru's 17. So he's like, you gotta go. So then he does some distraction, like hits her or throws something at her, and then Flint like runs off, and the lady's like getting super pissed off about the whole situation. And then Amelia and Subaru are fighting with her for a bit, but they're starting to get like way overwhelmed. And then right before the evil lady is about to do some sort of attack to like disembowel them or whatever, the wall like blasts open, and it's Reinhardt, and he's like, aha, and then she's like, fuck. And he's like, Subaru, go back and help Amelia. Amelia runs over to like heal Rom, and so she's like healing Rom and standing there, and then Subaru runs out of the way, and then Dude Meister starts like fighting with her. He's just like deflecting her blows with like his hand essentially and some sort of magic. And then she's like getting pissed off, and she's like, why don't you fight me? And he's like, I want to see what your sword can do. And he's like, oh, I only pull the sword out when it's needed. So clearly it hasn't come out because it's not needed. she talks shit back, and we find out she's like a bowel destroyer or something. She likes to disembowel people. And then she calls him like a sword saint again. And he's like, well, look, if it's gonna make you happy, he like picks up a sword off the ground and he's gonna fight you with this. And then he charges the magic, and he's just like, they're going back and forth. And then Amelia's like, she's like, wow, the Reinhardt guy's like fucking incredible. And she's like, well, he's holding back because he can't use like his power because like the mana in the room, because it will like absorb all the mana in the room to open up and like do his like actual fighting. And if he does that, I won't be able to heal Rom. So as soon as I'm done healing, you just shout out so he knows. And it's like, okay. So she finishes healing, and then she's like, Reinhardt. And he's like, all right, too, better get down. And then he like, the whole room like lights up with like his magical energy, and the sword lights up like a fucking giant lightsaber thingy. And he does like this super powerful attack that just turns like the whole screen white. And like, it's like, oh, well, she's dead. Likely. Most likely not, though, because anime. But the... So then everyone's like standing around, and then Subaru's like, wow, I can't believe you followed me all the way out here. That's super great. But like, you say you're a monster slayer, but you're a monster. You destroyed like this whole fucking building with your attack. And he's like, oh yeah. And then we find out that Flint, she like, when she left, she was like screaming for help, and then she bumped into Reinhardt, and he's like, I'll help you. And so he comes over, and then like Flint's like runs in, and she's like, Rom, and it's like, oh, he's okay, thank God. And then Emily's like, are you guys related? And she's like, no, but he's like my grandfather. I don't have like anyone else. And she's like, I get that. I have like a family member like that as well, which is Puck she's referring to. And then Amelia is like, give me my insignia back. And then Subaru kind of like plays peacemaker while Reinhardt just kind of stands there being awesome. And then, so Flint's finally like, okay, here you go. Or no, and then Reinhardt's like, well, this whole operation is pretty bad, and they stole an insignia, which is a pretty big deal. So I really should arrest them. But, I'm off duty, so fuck it, whatever. And Amelia's like, oh, you're very kind-hearted. You're very like bad boy knight. Bad knight. He's like, yeah, what are you gonna do about it? So then Flint goes to hand over the insignia. So he's like, yeah, sorry for all the trouble. I apologize. And then Amelia gets the insignia, but Reinhardt sees something on her wrist or something, and he's like, and he grabs her. He's like, you have to come with me right now. This is super important. Like, he gets all like extremely serious out of nowhere. And Amelia's like, what are you doing? And Flint's like, leave me alone. And he's like, nope. And he does something to like knock her out. And Amelia's like, how dare you? And he's like, don't worry, I just used a little bit to like make her go to sleep. And then he picks her up. He's like, I have to take her in. I'll probably contact you later. Like, this is like a super big deal. And then he looks up at like the full moon. And he's like, enjoy the moon while it lasts. Maybe the last happy moon we get all together. The fuck? And then Amelia's talking to Subaru, and she's like, what can I do for you? And he's like, oh, you can pay me back by telling me your name. And she's like, that's all you want? And because she gets embarrassed, he's like, I can have anything I want? And she's like, yes, anything. And he's like, I want to know your name. And she's like, it's Amelia. And he's like, hooray. And then Reinhardt's like, I'm very impressed you're able to like, so at some point, then the crazy lady like bursts out of the wall because she's still alive, and she goes to kill Amelia, but then Subaru jumps in the way and blocks it with like the shield he picked up off the ground, and then she like swears vengeance on all of them and disappears, and everyone's like very impressed. And then Reinhardt's like, huh, are you okay? And he picks up the shield and it's like cut in half, and Subaru's like, yeah, why? And then he opens up, he looks down at his shirt, and there's like a hole in his shirt, and then it's like bleeding, and he's like, oh fuck. And then he falls over, and then he's like passing out, and he sees Amelia like over him like healing or whatever, and they have a conversation after that about Amelia, because Reinhardt's like, I'll take him back to the palace and make sure he's okay. And she's like, no. He's like, my responsibility, I'll take care of him and take him back to my place. And he's like, oh, you guys must be very close. And she's like, no, we're like passing acquaintances. Like, I just met the guy like right now. He's like, what? And she's like, I know, he's a weirdo. And then that wraps up the episode. Yeah. And so the next episode begins, and he wakes up in like this mansion in like a bed, and he's looking at the ceiling. He's like, this place doesn't look familiar. And so then he walks out, and he walks down like this extravagant like hallway, and he's like, wait a second, the hallway's just circling on itself. And he's like, I'm going to choose that door. So he opens the door, and there's like that Lale girl, Bianca, from Isekai Quartet. And she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, hey, what's up, little girl, something, something. And she's like, whatever, human. And he's like, are you not really, are you not human, something, something? And she's like, hold on. And she like touches his chest and absorbs like a bunch of his mana. And he's like, rah! And he's like laying there passing out. And she's like, okay, I don't sense any maliciousness from you. You're fine. And then he wakes up again in the same bed. He's like, I did it again. I'm here. Like, this ceiling does look familiar. And then he hears like these sassy voices, and he finally gets up, and it's the twins, Rem and Ram, and they're like sassing him a whole bunch. And then Amelia runs in, and she's wearing this super sexy outfit, and he's like, hooray, people here really know what they're doing. And it's like, amen, brother. So he grabs Amelia and dashes outside so they can do like calisthenics in the morning, and they're doing like Japanese stretches and whatnot, which is like all the stuff you see in most anime. And so they do that for a little bit, and then the maids come out, and they're like, hey, Lord Roswell is back, so he wants to have like breakfast with everybody or whatever. And she's like, okie dokie. So then they go, and they run into, or Puck comes out at some point, and they're like, he's like, what? I'll do anything for you. You saved Amelia. I'm really proud of you. What do you want? And he's like, I want to be able to pet you whenever I want, because you're super soft. And he's like, oh, I love it. This is the best. And Amelia's like, you're a weirdo. And Puck's like, I love it. So then they go and they meet up with Bianca, and Bianca and Puck are like best friends forever. So they're like cuddling and tickling and like laughing and talking. And then Roswell shows up, and Subaru's like, who's the clown? And like, this is Lord Roswell, the greatest magic user in the kingdom. And he's like, well. And so then they're all having like a meal together talking about stuff. And then this is where we get some lore dump. We find out that the kingdom had a king, and that the king, something happened to him, and his whole household had to like get plagued. They got left, and so now there's a council of elders like ruling the kingdom, and they're like, there's a lot of like king candidates or ruler candidates, and then we find out Amelia is one of them, and that the insignia identifies her as one of the candidates to be like the next king / queen. The next ruler of the kingdom. And he's like, oh shit, that's like super important. Couldn't they just give you another one? And then Roswell's like, no, I mean, if she loses it, she's clearly not responsible enough to be the next ruler, the queen. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then Roswell's like, thank you so much for getting that back. I really appreciate it. What can I do for you? And he's like, I want to be a worker in your household. And everyone's like, Nani desu ka? He's like, all right. So then that happens, and so then the twins take him and get him like a little butler outfit and sew it up for him and whatnot, and then he goes and does like housework with everybody. We find out that Rem, the blue-haired one, is good at everything, and that Ram is okay at some things but terrible at other things, so she's a really bad maid. So, but she has, Ram can't do everything, so Ram does the stuff that she's not terrible at, essentially. And so then Ram takes Subaru around and like they like pick berries and they like wash things and they prep food for Rem and do all this stuff. And then the whole time Subaru's like cutting his hand and stuff. And then Amelia is off doing like king training or studying or prepping to be like for the test of queenship or whatever. I'm trying to think if anything else happens here. Oh, we find out that Bianca is like, she's a protector of like the secret library because again, Roswell is like the greatest magician of all time or something, and he has a lot of forbidden books, and so he wants to protect it. So she was hired specifically just to like protect the library, and that she has an ability to like make any door go to like her room, which is the library, or like not go to her room. But then for some reason, Subaru has the ability to just like pick out where she's at like immediately without any effort whatsoever, and so that's very disturbing to some people. What else? Oh, at some point he's hanging out with Amelia while she's talking about like, you're a weirdo because of this, that, and then he's like, whatever, and she's like, oh, why do you have all these cuts? Let me heal it. And he's like, no, I kind of like it. It kind of reminds me of the things I'm doing and helps me get better. I like hard work and whatnot. And hey, so I was like hanging out down in the town with some kids and stuff. Do you want to come with me tomorrow? And she's like, well, sure. After I do my training in the morning, we can go. And he's like, awesome, it's a date. And she's like blushing and he's blushing and he's like, heck yeah. And he's like super excited and he's like walking back to his room and he sees Bianca and says some creepy thing about touching her hair because she's got like the drill hair. And she's like, whatever, creep. And then he goes back to his room and he's like, I can't sleep. I'm so excited to go on like this date with Amelia. And so then he falls asleep and then he wakes up and he hears the twins and he's like, oh, what are you guys doing in my room? And they're like, what do you mean you're a guest here? We're checking on you. And he's like, guest? And then he realizes, like, ruh-roh, that he has been ReZeroed out back to when he first woke up with the twins originally, I think. And he's like, oh no, how? What happened? Did I die? Something. Oh, also, during episode 3 here, or episode 4, we get a scene where Roswell is like holding Ram very closely and they're talking about whether Subaru is a spy or not, and she's like, I don't think so. If he is, he's a very bad spy. And he's like, very interesting. Well, let's keep an eye on that. So Subaru wants to reenact the day before because he really, really, really wants a date with Amelia. And so he tries to do that, but it doesn't work out so well. There's like several different things that cause like problems in his trying to reenactment. It just doesn't go exactly the same way. In fact, he ends up spending a lot more time with Rem, the blue-haired one. I think her name's Rem. And we see a lot of her like kind of like having affection towards him and feelings. We see him like interact with the kids of the town. We see him spending more time in the evening with Ram because she's teaching him how to like read and write in the language, something he was not able to do before. And she recognizes that he's like completely illiterate. And so he's learning like fairy tales and going over all that stuff and whatnot. And that's the episode. We get like a funny scene with him and Roswell like taking a bath together in like the hot tub and his like beautiful naked physique and like the fact that he wears like a Speedo. Just some more kind of funny stuff like that. He has this like clown makeup he wears is also that's not his face clearly, so it's makeup. We get confirmation on that as well. He also connects with Beatrice a little bit more. He goes in the library and like asks her questions about things. And that proceeds for both episode 5 and 6 because we get all the way through episode 5, and it's just, and then he like dies again and wakes up. And this time he's like, the fuck, man. So clearly something's happened to me at night. And he says something about hearing chains at night. And so in episode 6, when he like redoes the life, this time he does things differently. So in episode 5, he was trying to reenact episode 4 essentially completely, and it didn't work out exactly well. But he still ended up with the date with Amelia, and then when he died again, and in episode 6, he realized that, okay, something is definitely happening. So he goes to talk to Beatrice, and she talks about like a curse. She talks about how druids have some sort of, or shamans. I think it was shamans. Shamans have some sort of cursing magic that could cause him to like drain his mana out, or no, to die in his sleep from tiredness or something, but that they're very weak and that they like there's no way they would be like in this place being able to do that. And so then he talks to and the whole thing with like demons comes up a couple times with Rim and Ram, and they both get like very sensitive about it. Obviously, if you've watched my stuff and we go back to Isekai Quartet, we know that they're demon mates. But I guess spoiler alert if you didn't know that. Okay, so excuse me. And both the times he like brings it up, like at some point he's walking with Rem. They went on like a shopping trip and coming back, and he says something about like instead of like divine intervention, he says like demon intervention or demon blessing or something. And she's like, "You're cool with that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, demons seem to be much more like laid back and fun." And she's like, "I like that a lot," right? Because she's a demon. And then so then he wakes up again in episode 6, and like he died again, so he's trying to figure this out, right? So this time, the big difference is instead of being like, I want to work for you, Roswell, and being like an employee, he's a guest. And so the maids treat him like with a lot of indifference. Like they don't really talk to him. He tries to engage with them. They kind of just like blow him off, call him sir a lot. But at some point he gives Ram a hard time about not being friendly enough. And then so she brings him tea like on, because all these events take place in like 3 or 4 days, I think. And so on one of the days, Ram comes in while he's like studying the writing system and reading and stuff, which because he died a couple times, he like is picking it up pretty well. And so he starts talking about these like fairy tales that he's reading in this book for like children. And there's 2 fairy tales. There's one about the witch and there's one about the dragon. And the dragon is like, it's more of a folk tale than like a fairy tale, because there's actually the previous king royal family made a deal with like a local dragon to protect the kingdom, and so he's kind of involved somewhat in like this change of kingship, or like Amelia becoming the queen or whatever. But like he hasn't been like that involved, and so people are like questioning like, is he going to get involved or do something, or just be like, well, the royal family's dead, I guess I'm done, or like there's a lot of questions about like what's going on with that, which seem like they'll be relevant for later. And then Subaru is like, oh, it's like a story from my homeland. And she's like, what's the story? And it's about a red ogre and a blue ogre. And of course, ogres, like oni, demons, that's all kind of like synonymous in Japanese. So I feel like the localizers is really like fucked up, because it really should have just been like demons, or they should have just gone with ogres or oni the whole time. But I feel like a lot of animes do this, where like stuff gets translated and it's like, yeah, oni has like a larger connotation in things. And then that is like, the Japanese people understand like ogres are a type of demon or a type of oni or a type of like yokai, right? Which are spiritual beings. And then demons are also in that realm as well. Like when the Japanese talk about demons, they're not talking about like Satan demons. They're talking about like this kind of like oni yokai kind of situation, right? And so it's like more like mystical creatures that it's like fairies, the way people use fairies in like Western lore, where it's like fairies are not necessarily good or bad. They're just like an alien species that has like no concept of like humanity and whatnot. And demons in Japanese lore are kind of more like that. It's like they'll do like really awful, evil things, but at the same time, it's kind of like, eh. And then ogres tend to be a little bit more on the side, like oni tend to be a little bit more on the side of dark creatures. Like they're more like they cause like more harm or whatever. They're almost like red caps, and if we're comparing to like fairies in like Western kind of like mythology, if you will, where it's like there's definitely like more, like, again, it's like they're alien creatures. Their concepts of like morality and stuff cannot be equated to like Christian morality, which most of us live under. So but it's like clearly like what the red caps are doing would be seen by like a human as like an evil act, and oftentimes oni or the ogres their acts are also seen as like evil. So you have the story that Subaru tells, where like the red ogre and blue ogre, and then the red ogre wants to be friends with humans, but they won't because he's an ogre, and then the blue ogre is like, well, I'm gonna go mess him up and cause a scene, and then you come rescue them, and then they'll be your friends. So that happens, and then the blue ogre like doesn't come around anymore, and so the red ogre goes to find out what's going on with his friend the blue ogre, and the blue ogre like sacrificed everything. And then Ram gets like very like into the story and like very concerned, because obviously like Red, she has pink hair, and then Ram has blue hair, right? So they're red, and she has red eyes, and Ram has, maybe she has blue eyes, I don't know, I wasn't looking, but but you know what I mean. So it's like the symbolic, like he's telling a story essentially about these sisters somewhat and their natures, and like being self-sacrificing and wanting something, and then one of them sacrificing for the other, and yada yada yada. And so that really touches like on Ram, and she's like, don't tell Ram this story. Okay, so then after Subaru gathers his information, kind of does a lot of research, he decides that next thing he's going to do is he's going to leave on the night that he's supposed to die, and then he's going to observe the manor house and then he's going to like stop the murderer, because part of his concern as well is not just that he's dying, that people in the house are getting killed as well, and so he wants to stop any of that bad juju from happening. So he's like hiding out on like a cliff overlooking the manor after he pretends to like leave to go to the capital, and then he's just hanging out watching, and then suddenly he hears like the chain, and this giant like morning star comes out at him, and he like dodges out of that, hops down the cliff, runs, and then like gets like attacked again, and he like is able to like deflect it with his jacket, it seems. And then he's like, who are you? Get out here right now, like something. And then it's like and then Rem walks out, And it's like, uh-oh, what's happening? How could it be you? And that wraps up episode 6. Subaru is able to escape from Rem for a little bit, but he runs into a trap, like a bear trap, and fucking collapses over, and then Rem walks up, and they have a whole conversation, and it seems like she killed him or she wanted to kill him because he was being suspicious, and she's like demanding all these answers about like who paid him, who had hired him to like investigate Millie, where's he coming from, like what's his angle, all this kind of stuff. And he obviously is not involved with anybody, and no one sent him over or anything. And then she mentions that he smells like the witch. And he's like, the fuck? I don't smell like a witch. I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, you smell like a witch. You can't be trusted. And then he dies. And then he wakes up. And he's like, ugh. And so at this point, he's like, okay, so the demon girls are trying to kill me, right? The twins. So I got to like hide out. So then he goes into Beatrice and is like, hey, something. They talk about curses. They talk about the witch a little bit, the witch of envy. We don't get into a lot of details at this point. We get a little bit more later. But he is determined not to die this time. So this time around, he asked Beatrice to be his guardian and to protect him for the 4 days. And she's like, all right, I'll make a pact with you that no matter, as long as you're in this manner, I will protect you. Or as long as you're, yeah. And he's like, okay, good. So then they shake hands. He like ignores everybody and then like, sleeps for like 4 days straight or something. I was a little confused by that, but it seems like he just like stays in the library, or like he just stays asleep and avoids everybody for like 4 days. And then he wakes up and she's like reading a book and he's in the library and he's like, oh, did you bring me here? And he's like, yes. And he's like, did you hold my hand? And she's like, what ridiculous nonsense is that? We later find out it was the twins who were holding his hand because he seemed like he was really sick and having a hard time and they were trying to comfort him and whatnot. Why is my cruise control on? Get off. Okay. So at that point, she's like, okay, you're weird. And then she like stands up and she's like, oh, I'm getting a summons. And so she leaves and then he's like, something. And then he's like, all right, I got to go see what's going on. So he opens the door and it's the 5th day. So he thought he was, he just had to make it to the 4th day and he'd be okay. And then he runs into Amelia and he's super happy and talking. And she's like, hey, come here. And then we see Rem over Rem's dead body. And we find out that she was cursed with the same curse that killed, Subaru like the first couple of times, and he's like, what the fuck? And then Ram's like, she thinks it's him because again he's suspicious as fuck because he didn't like engage with them at all, and so they didn't grow any like feelings or emotions towards him or trust like they did in like the second time through. I think this is like the 4th time through, and he's super concerned because the first time he resurrected it was 3 times, so he doesn't know if he can resurrect like the 4th time. He might just die forever, so he's being kind of a coward in this setting. And so Ram goes to attack him, and then Beatrice protects him, and then Roswald gets like involved, and then Amelia's like, I believe Subaru as well. And then he's like, fuck, and so he makes a run for it, and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do, and he goes and finds the trap that Rem got him killed, or that caught him before, and he's thinking about that. Then he's like, no. So he goes up to like a cliff and he's thinking about killing himself and throwing him off and just ending this whole thing and making it so he's not negatively affecting any of these people that he's grown to like love over the 4 days, because he's a very emotional young man and he can develop like feelings of love within like 3 or 4 days, which is insane. Anyway, so anyway, while he's doing that, he's like freaking out, and then Beatrice shows up and she's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I need to get you out of here. And he's like, it's the 5th day, what are you doing? And she's like, I didn't put an end stop on when I would protect you, so like this cosmic deal they made or whatever, and so I have to keep protecting you. And then she's like, we gotta go. And then he's like shouting and complaining and like all this stuff, and then all of a sudden Ram, and she's like, well, it's too late now. And so Ram starts walking up and she's super pissed and covered in like demon fire or whatever, and she's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, why'd you do this to my sister, you asshole, something. And Beatrice says some really cryptic shit about them not being whole anymore and there's nothing you can do or something. And Subaru's like, there is something to do. So he goes up and like confronts Ram for a second and says some like wackadoo shit about how he's gonna make things right and how he's gonna save. And she's like, what are you fucking talking about, my sister's dead. And he's like, I'll take care of it. And then he runs and jumps off the cliff to his death. And then he like wakes up and he's back. So apparently he can die as a million times. I think it is okay. So that's episode 5. I can't remember if it's the beginning of episode 5 or episode 6. At some point between these episodes, he's talking to Amelia. I think it's an episode. I think it's in episode 5. Yeah, I forgot this. Because after he kind of freaks out with the twins, because obviously he died to Rem in the beginning of episode 5, then Amelia comes to check on him because the twins were like, he's losing his fucking mind. and he's holding her hand, and she's like, I just want to help you. And he's like, oh, I can get her to help me. This would be so much easier to figure out what's going on and like solve the problem. And so he tries to tell her that he dies and gets resurrected constantly, but as he does, like he gets enveloped in like shadow, like in his brain, like she doesn't see shit, but he's essentially and it's like overwhelmed with like the utmost terrifying fear, and he's like, and he can't tell her, and he like freaks out. Okay, so onward to round number 5, I want to say, which is episode 6. So he gets up and he's like, fuck, I gotta, okay. So, and then he goes and talks to Beatrice and he gets some more information about curses and stuff. So it's like, okay, so the twins, so Rem killed him in that one redo, but only because he didn't make friends with them and she was suspicious, right? And their utmost desire is to like protect the mansion and everyone inside, especially Amelia, right? So he's like, okay, so this time around I gotta make friends with everybody and I gotta figure out this curse business, because the curse is not just me, it's also whoever, and so then I gotta stop the curse. So then so he's like trying to figure that out. He goes back to being like working so he can be close to Rem and Ram, and he's doing all this stuff, and Rem and Ram are kind of suspicious because obviously at this point this is like round 5, so he's been technically working for them for like 5 weeks, and so he knows like where all the shit is at, and he's not like cutting himself anymore. He's actually like very good at a lot of this like housework stuff, which is they're kind of like sketched out by it, and he's so enthusiastic. Like at some point he breaks like a vase and he goes and like replaces it, and Rem's like, how'd you know where the vases were? and he's like, Ram told me, and she's like, and he's like, I gotta go. And then also at some point he's like hanging out with Amelia, and then he starts talking to Puck, and they're talking about like magic, and we find out that she's like a spirit user. So there's like different kinds of magic. There's like wizard magic, I guess, which is like where you draw the mana from inside you, and then there's like spirit magic where you draw it from like spirits, which is all around us, which I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous episode. Amelia kind of explains that there's Puck, who's like a grand spirit or whatever, and then there's all these like little spirits that also exist that she can draw mana from or use magic from. This 6th episode, we get like a lot of information, so I'm just going to figure this out. Okay, so then Puck, and so then Subaru's like, do I have magic? And Puck explains like, oh yeah, there's the basic 4 elementals, the basic bitch, our JRPG 4 elementals, wind, water, earth, fire. And then he's like, oh, what kind of magic do I have? And he's like, let me check. And he checks and he's like, wow, you got shadow magic. And he's like, shadow magic? He's like, yeah, there's also shadow and light magic. And in my head, I'm like, of course there's fucking shadow and light magic. It's like a fucking JRPG trope for like hundreds of years. Anyway, so he's a shadow user, and he's like, cool, what kind of stuff can I do with that? And it's all like debuffs. It's like blind and hide, and I don't know. He said a bunch of different things. But then Puck's like, let me show you. So then he casts like, it's like Shamak or something, which is like a blinding spell, and then he's wandering around in darkness, and he's freaking out, and then Puck turns it off, and he's like, holy shit. Because it's the same thing that like he felt before, because he's clearly got like this shadow business going on. And then he's like, can you help me teach me how to use it? And he's like, sure, we'll practice. And so he's like, okay, you're going to have like a little gate, and then you're going to draw the mana from that inside you, and then it's going to be good. And then he's like, Amelia, go over there so that you don't get damaged. And she runs like all the way across this giant manor. And he's like, really, that fucking far? And so he starts activating like his gate, and then it like overwhelms him, and it creates like almost like a nuclear explosion of like a shadow magic. It's not that big, but it's like this huge burst of like shadow magic, and he's like, it completely drains him because it like sucked all his mana out. So she gives him like a cookie, which helps restore his mana or whatever. And then Puck's like, you need a lot more fucking training, man. Like, you had no control. The gate, as soon as you open that gate, the mana just like poured out, which is what caused all that business. And he's like, okay, good to go. So then, he continues about his business. And then at some point, he has some downtime. So he goes back to Beatrice, and he's like hanging out with her, talking to her. And she's like, why are you always fucking coming in here? He's like, because we're best friends, and I'm going to call you like Little Bay or something. And it's like Bay Kokoro or something, Bayko. It's like what you call little kids. And she's like, I don't like this. And he's like, it's how I show affection. And she's like, Anyway, she starts talking about, he's like, I smell like a witch, huh? And she's like, yeah, she's like, yes. Is what? Because she's confused. And then he's like, tell me more about this Witch of Envy. So apparently the Witch of Envy, there were like a whole bunch of witches, or 4 other witches, or something like that. Maybe just 3. Oh no, I think there were 6 other witches, because at some point she's like, there's a witch for every like 7 deadly sin. And so she's the Witch of Envy, right? So then she ate all the other witches, and then she became like very lonely, and then it's like rumored that she can't die, she like never ages, she's like she's like almost like an alien creature essentially at this point, because she's not like no concept of what it means to be like a mortal human being and whatnot. And then he's like, oh, that's crazy. And he's like, and she's like, oh, also just so you know, and her name's Satella, right? Obviously. And then just so you know, her physical form is supposed to still exist in like this plane of existence, even though she, being like this crazy monster creature, was sealed by like a dragon, a hero, and a knight or something like that, or a wizard and a hero, or hero and a knight and a dragon. Anyway, but even though she was still, her physical form still supposedly like exists in this world. And he's like, oh yeah? And she's like, yeah, it's a half elf with silver hair. And he's like, oh shit, that's why that's why Amelia. And so he's thinking, he's like, oh, that's why he called her like Satella, because if like her name's Satella and she looks like the witch, no one's gonna like go for her to be king, so it's like, or to be queen, so it's like a way for her to protect herself from people who are gonna like try to hurt her, because it's like she's trying to pretend like she's not taking this like what do you call it, ascension seriously. Anyway, so that's good information to have. And so clearly the witch, obviously, if you know anything about anything in life, you've watched like a single other anime, you know that like somehow this witch is involved with Subaru's like business with like reincarnating and whatnot, or dying and coming back. It's super fucking obvious, but we don't get any more information on that at this point. Anyway, so then he's like, well, tell me more. He's like, do you want to know anything else? Or she's like, all right, enough. And he's like, well, I got one more question for you. And she's like, oh my god, okay, go ahead. And he's like, tell me about curses. And she's like, well, there's not much to know. Like, it's like, can you stop curses? You cannot stop curses. Once a curse is like occurred, there's no way to get rid of it. It's like, well, what about detecting? She's like, yes, I can obviously detect curses, but it's very hard because there's one rule about curses, and that's that they have to be done by touch. And Subaru's like, wait, is it by touch, huh? Then who? And then he's like, remembers that like the night he dies of the curse, he's always in the village. So he's like, oh, someone in the village must be doing the curses. And because he wasn't like being friendly with Rem that one day, she went, and then she got cursed because she's the one who got touched. And he's like, oh shit, that makes sense. And so he's like, okay, I got to go to the village, and so there's someone there who's doing these curses, so I got to figure that out. So then he goes back to Rem and is like, hey, I want to go to the village, and we need spices or something, right? And she's like, well, actually, yes, we do need spices. And then he's like, can we go today instead of tomorrow? And she's like, what do you think? And Ram's like, yes, in fact, I'm going to go too. That way you can have 2 beautiful flowers in each arm. And he's like, ooh, these poison flowers. And they both like giggle. And so that's episode 6. So the 3 of them take this little trip to the village, and they all have a grand old time. Subaru goes around and gets every person in the village, like the creepy old woman and the mayor, and then some random guy, to touch him in a different location, so that when Beatrice is later able to identify the curse, he can figure out exactly where the curse originated from, right? And then allow him to solve the problem with the village and make sure everyone's going to do okay. So after he does all that, then he gets like grabbed up by the kids again, because they want to take him and do the puppy thing and chat and all that stuff. So he goes and they hang out with the kids for a little bit, and then he like pets the puppy, and then the puppy bites him on the hand once again, just like he did before. And so after they all finish that up, they head back to the house, and he goes to see Beatrice. And at this point, I got a little confused, because I could have sworn at some point Beatrice was like, you can't undo curses. And then she literally just like identifies where the curse is at and then dismisses it. And I was like, wait, didn't you say that you can't do this? Oh, whatever. It's like fucking, I should have read the subtitles. I'm sure it made more sense there. Anyway, so that was sort of confusing, but whatever, we'll roll with it. It didn't make sense that you couldn't break the curse anyway, but maybe it's something where it's like after the curse is like completed or something. Anyway, but the curse is in his hand, and he's like, wait a second. The puppy bit me in my hand. Oh no, the puppy's the problem. And so then he goes and talks to Rem and Ram, and he gets one of them to, and at some point when they came back, Roswell is like, I gotta go check something out. And he's dressed in like a riding crop, or a riding like outfit, like a horse riding outfit. And then he takes off, and he just literally like flies up into the air and then like teleports out of there. And Subaru's like, holy shit, magic is awesome. Like, oh goodness. Which is new. That didn't happen any other time. So he's like, that's weird. I wonder why. Oh, well, I guess we'll figure it out later, maybe. So then, so then he gets Rem and Ram, and he gets Rem to come with him to the village so they can check it out and try to figure out what's going on and find the puppy and whatnot. And he learns that there's like these creatures, like witch fiends, that hang out in like the woods and other places, and that all the towns and villages and cities have these like barriers that are kept up to like keep the witches' minions out. And so when they get to the village, they immediately run into a guy who's like, oh, hey, the kids are all missing. He's like, fuck, I knew it. So then they go and they see that the barrier's been broken somehow. They don't dwell on that too long because they got to go get the kids. And then Rem's really concerned about the house, and he's like, don't you just believe? Well, Ram can take care of it. Don't you believe that? And Rem's like, yeah, I guess, because they got Amelia too and Beatrice, but so finally he convinces her to go, and so they head out into the woods, and then they like. I can't remember if they fight a monster right away, but no, I don't think they do actually. They find the kids, and they all have like bite marks on them, so they're cursed, obviously. And so he gets Rem. Yeah, he gets Rem to take the kids back to the village so they can start being looked after. And then he goes and looks for one of the girls that's still missing. And because one of the other girls is like, and he has this whole thing where it's like he knows every kid's like dream, and that's what he uses to like get Rem to go along with him. Anyway, so she does that. Yeah, he goes and finds the girl, but it's like a trap, I guess, because like there's a beast that comes out, and so he like beats the shit out of that beast. The beast jumps at him, he like gets him to bite his arm, and then he like slams the beast onto like a piece of wood that has like a thing sticking out, and so that kills that beast real good. He's like, got him, suck it bitches. And then there's like 45 more beasts, and he's like, fuck. So he grabs the girl, and he's about to make a run for it, and then Rem shows up, and she's got her fucking Morning Star mace thingy, and she starts just like, she kills a few of them, and then he's like, oh, that's fucking awesome, you're amazing, can you keep doing that? And she's like, no, it's too many. So they're fuck. So then they make a run for it back towards the village. So they're run, and she's beating him. And then there's like a little puppy doggy. It looks like the puppy doggy that bit him from before. It looks like that one's leading the charge. It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like the characters don't see this puppy in the middle, like controlling everything, but it seems like they look, and then we see an image, we see it, and then they go back, but no one ever brings it up in like this episode 9 or episode 10, which is like directly a follow-on. Anyway, so then at some point, Subaru's about to get bit, but then Rem like activates her like Oni horn, her like demon horn, and then she goes kind of like berserk, and she starts just killing the shit out of these things, and he's like, holy fuck. And while she's doing that, it's because she gets like blasted, because like the little doggy demon creature has like some sort of like earth magic powers. Anyway, so then she starts killing the shit out of all these things. And then she's about to get like jumped by like 4 or 5 of them, and Subaru goes back and like pushes her out of the way, and then he gets like bit up real good. And then he passes out. And then he's kind of waking up, and he sees Beatrice and Rem like arguing, and then he falls asleep again, and then he wakes up, and Puck's there, and then Amelia's like against the wall, like passed out, and he's like, the fuck? And then Puck's like, hey, you got bit up real good, but we saved you, don't worry about it. And he's like, huh? And he's like, what about the kids of the village? Oh, they all got saved, you did a great job. Beatrice and I were able to like undo all the curses and, you know, save all the kids, and Amelia used like all her magic powers to like save you, protect you, and like heal you. So that's super nice, and like the village is good to go. And so then Subaru like stumbles out, and runs into Ram, and she like shoves food in his mouth and is like, you need to eat. And she's like very grateful that he saved her sister. And so then they go back to the village. One of the village leaders gives him like the sharpest sword in the village or whatever. And then all the kids are super grateful, and they give him like presents and stuff, like a coin, not a coin, like a glowing stone, some other bullshit, and then like some grubs. Anyway, at some point Beatrice walks up to him and is like, hey, we need to talk. And she's like, you got like half a day to live. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, when you got bit by those animals, you got cursed like 500 times or whatever. And the curses are very deep, and there's a lot of them. And so it's like, and then she explains like undoing, and he's like, well, undo it. And she's like, well, it's tough. Like one curse is like undoing a knot. And so when you have like a bunch of curses stacked on top of each other, it becomes much more like intricate and problematic like issue to deal with. And at some point around here, we like entered episode 10, by the way. But anyway, so he seems like very unconcerned, and he's like, yeah, I'm very unconcerned about the whole situation. And it's like, oh, okay. And then she's like, well, I don't understand. And he's like, well, you wouldn't have brought me over here and told me this so calmly if there wasn't like something to do about it. And she's like, okay, so what the deal with the curse is that they're marking you to drain your mana so they can come like feast upon you, or they feast upon your mana or something. And so if you can kill the monster that like gave you the curse in the first place, then like you're gonna be good to go. And he's like, oh, okay, so all I gotta do is head out and like kill these things. And then at some point he's like, wait, where's Rem? And she's like, where do you think she's at? What would she do? What would you do in her situation? And he's like, fuck, she's out there. And then at that same time, like coincidentally, or because she was stalking Subaru, Ram is like, the fuck are you guys talking about? And so she's like, oh my gosh. So she's about to like run off to get Ram. And then Subaru kind of calls her out, being like, you don't have combat capabilities like Rem, do you? And you're not a combat maid, I think is what he calls her. And she's like, no, I have wind magic, but that's like it. And he's like, well, I'm going to go with you. And then Beatrice is just kind of like watching as they have like a plan of action. They're going to go track her down. And apparently Ram does have the power to like see through the eyes of like creatures in the forest or whatever. So they can kind of track down Ram and go find her. So her and Subaru head out, and like in their journey, Subaru and Ram start talking about how she doesn't have a horn. We don't get exactly why she doesn't have a horn, but then she tells this story about how demons are born with 2 horns, but and twins are always born with 1 horn each. And so usually the twins are like killed, but for some reason they were spared. We don't get any further information about any of that. But again, for some reason, Rem doesn't have a horn. And it could be related to that story we heard about like trying to become more with like the people of the humans and stuff, and how that affected like the red and blue Oni or whatever, or ogres. So maybe we'll learn more about that later, I'm assuming. Okay, so we know she doesn't have a horn. She has very limited combat capabilities. They do fight some of these like witch fiends or whatever, these like dogs, demon dogs, and they kill a shit out of them. And then it's like, oh, how are we gonna find Rem? Like, I've lost, it's like blah blah blah, something. And then Subaru's like, I got an idea. He's like, are you ready to fight? And she's like, yeah, I'm ready to fight. And so then he's about to tell her about his like about his resurrection, because every time he does, it like increases his witch scent. And like the demon, because at some point they talk about how like, I don't understand why these guys are like after you so much. And he's like, and he says, because he stinks like the witch. And she's like, you do stink like the witch, how do you know that? And he's like, don't worry about it. And she's like, Roger. Anyway, so he's like, crap, I got something important to tell you. And she's like, what? He's like, I res her. And then brrr, and then she's like, what was that? Oh, it stinks of the witch now. And then they hear like these howling, and you see like the dogs like all turn and like start running towards him. And even Rem is like, what? And so then they get accosted, and they fight the dogs a little bit, but very quickly they get overwhelmed. So Ram runs out of like magic powers or whatever. And so Subaru has to pick her up, and they're running. And then at some point he like jumps off like a cliff and uses like the sword to like glide down, sort of. And then and then Ram has to use some like the last of her like wind powers to like stop them from completely falling all the way down. And then she's like unconscious, and he's like, fuck. And then they're surrounded by dogs again, and then Rem shows up, and it's like, ta-da, but she's like berserk mode, and so she wants to attack him because he stinks of the witch the most, and he's like, fuck. So and then so the dogs start fighting Rem, and she's fighting back, and she's getting like a little overwhelmed. And so he's like, I'm gonna help her out. So he's like, Rem, I res her. And then boom, and then like everybody turns and looks at him, and then the dogs start chasing him, and so Rem's able to like kill them, and he starts running. And at that point Ram wakes up, but then he gets jumped. Oh no. So then he's like, how do I stop like Rem from being in like berserk mode? And Rem is like, oh, you gotta just like hit her horn or break her horn or something. I think it's just hit her horn, so it goes away, and that will kind of wake her up. And he's like, that'll work. And she's like, I don't know, maybe. So he's like, fuck it. So then he's like, I got a plan, you okay with that? And she's like, do what you gotta do, save my sister. And so he throws Ram at Rem, so she catches her, and then he charges her with his sword. It goes to swing, but she dodges, and he's like, fuck. And then he gets like blasted up into the air, and then she's like waiting for him to come back down so she can kill him, because he stinks of the witch, right? She's in like berserk mode. And he pulls his sword out, and he's like, I'm gonna do this no matter what, I'm gonna save you. And then he like pulls the sword out, and he's gonna like dive bomb right into like her horn to like crash into it and cause them to be saved? Question mark. That wraps up episode 10. We go back in time here and learn about Rem and Ram's past. So Rem and Ram were born in the demon village, and obviously, as we learned before, they're twins, and they said they were going to kill them immediately. But Ram apparently was a prodigy when it comes to demon magic and whatnot. So she was just crushing it. Like, she knocked back the demon elder who was trying to kill the twins at the time when she was a baby with her magic, and then she progressed to just continue to be excellent. Rem, on the other hand, was not excellent. She was very mediocre to bad. And so she always felt like she was living in her sister's shadow. And so at some point she's like, well, my magic's never going to be as good as Ram's. So instead, what I'm going to do is concentrate on like household stuff. So she taught herself how to cook, to clean, do all the stuff, like the maid stuff that she's really good at came from this and following her mother. Right. And then even though she felt inadequate, her parents like always talked about how they loved both of them the same and how they were happy. But she kept having these like crazy ideas that like everyone wanted her dead and that she was inferior and that life would be better if it was just Ram and whatnot. At some point she gets rescued by Ram, and then, she makes delicious food and her parents are super happy and whatnot. A bit later in their lives, as they're older, the village gets attacked and like burned down, and everyone gets killed. It looks like, except Ram, who's like fighting off all these like evil guys. And then at some point, Rem like stumbles out, and Ram sees her, so she goes up to her, and then that gives it the opportunity for somebody to cut off her horn. And then so that's how she lost her horn. And then Rem felt at that point that she had to do everything she possibly could to help her sister and to make up for her. But like she always felt inferior despite being the only one who had powers at this point and trying to take care of everything. And she just had to be perfect all the time. At this juncture, she wakes up, and Subaru's carrying her, and they're running away from the demon beasts, and Ram's there. And then finally, they determine that Rem wakes up. They like chide her for trying to be like a solo fighter, and for not separating from the party and whatnot. And then Subaru hands Rem over to Rem and is like, "Take her to the barrier. I'm going to fight this thing." So he takes his broken sword, and Rem complains. And Ram's like, "No, we're leaving." And so they start to head to the barrier. She's like, "No, I have to save him. I have to fight together. I have to make up something, blah blah blah." And she like remembers all the fun stuff that Subaru did for her in like this timeline. And so Rem's like fighting the demon beast and stabbing him and whatnot. And then at some point he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna F and die. This is it. This is it for me." And then Roswell just like shows up and burns the crap out of everybody, like burns everyone to the ground, kills all the demon beasts, and like that's the end of that. And then Subaru like passes out. He wakes up the next morning. Rem's holding his hand, and he's like, "Oh, what happened?" And then she informs him that Roswell went and killed like all the demon beasts, so all the curses are out of his system, so he was able to survive the night, and whatnot. And then she thanks him for being there and promises that they're always gonna like be together or something. We then go to Roswell. I'm trying to remember if anything else happens that day. No, it's like so he wakes up in the morning, and then it's like a whole day goes by. And then that evening, we see Roswell meeting with Ram again, like they do. This is like the second or third time we've seen this, where she like climbs into his lap after she informs him that there was a child that disappeared after this, and that she was tracking who sent all the demon beasts and was causing the problems. But then at some point, the trail went cold. So clearly, one of the children was like somehow involved with something and something. Anyway. So we don't get confirmation who that was or so Ram climbs in Roswell's lap, and then he says something about mana or her horn or something, and then he takes his finger and says some sort of magic spell and touches her horn where the horn used to be, and like injects her with like mana, it seems like. And then he talks about how he's going to be gone again, so he's going to trust Ram and Rem to take care of the household for Amelia and Bianca and a Subaru, and that he really needs this. And they talk about the secession crisis essentially, and how like the bow hunter and then these demon beasts, and if they're all tied into that. And he's like, my main goal, I need Amelia to be the queen, because my goal is to find and kill the dragon. Dun, dun, dun. So the dragon, if we had forgotten, because I don't know if I really even talked about it that much, he's the one who put the original kingdom on the throne, the king and his royal family on the throne, and he's somehow related to all this stuff. So we finished episode 11, and before we get to episode 12 and continue on with the first season, there was a couple movies that came out between season 1 and 2. One of the movies takes place directly between season 1 and 2, so depending on how that goes, that might be its own video. If not, we'll just talk about it at the end of this one. You'll find out when you get to the end of this one. Anyway, so the first one is called Memory Snow, and it's like a episode 11.5 pretty much. Like it takes place right between, like as soon as episode 11 ends, the Memory Snow takes place and lasts for a few days, and then episode 12 like picks up right afterwards. So what Memory Snow is Subaru's getting ready for his date and talking to Amelia and having a good time, and Rem's getting more and more like into Subaru as well, like having a huge crush on him and all, because he saved her like multiple times at this juncture in like the realms of like him actually staying alive and like the memory that everyone has and whatnot, not his like resurrections or whatever. Which the last few episodes, the resurrection thing has gotten like really like sidelined, which is interesting. I'm fine with it. The whole thing is kind of silly, but whatever. So this episode or this movie focuses on this situation with Puck. So what happens is it starts getting colder and colder in the house, and then Subaru keeps trying to like find ways about it, and he's talking to the girls about it, and Amelia's being kind of like super sketchy about the whole situation, but they have to like reschedule the date because it's too cold. And then at some point it gets like out of control, and everyone's wearing like these heavy cloaks and jackets and stuff, and Subaru's got like a blanket covering him, and Ram has like a huge blanket covering her completely so you can see her face. And then he's like super concerned. Subaru's super concerned about the village and the people in the village, and he brings it up with Roswell, and Roswell's like, "Oh, they're fine. There's a couple of people here keeping all like the cold magical energy like within that mansion area." And he's like, what? And so he takes him over to Amelia, and they knock on her door, and she's like, oh, no, don't come in, please, something, something, something. And then he looks over at Roswell, and he's like, go ahead. And so Subaru, like, bursts in there, and it's like an ice palace, and they're, like, fucking frozen. And he's like, what's happening? And then she's, like, holding something back, and then he sees, like, Puck, like, tied up on the ground. And so what we find out is that so there's gates and there's magical energy and spirits and all this shit, but there's also this thing called Ord, and Ord is like a vase, I guess, or like a container for magic. So when you bring magic in, it like fills up your Ord, and when your Ord gets like totally full, it'll like explode out and cause like worldwide destruction or something. So then you have to like release the magical energy over time, because like constantly you're filling up your magical energy, I guess, with some of these creatures. And so someone like Roswell or Beatrice, they like are constantly using magic, so their Ord never gets even close to being filled up. And then someone like Rem or Amelia, they have like, so their magic is so weak that it really doesn't like cause any problems. But Puck, normally we get a whole story about him and Amelia when they just lived in the forest. Like he would constantly just be like releasing magic, so it wouldn't be a big deal. But since they're just like hanging out in this mansion not doing shit all, that it's like it builds up, and then like a couple times a year he's got to do these, they call so it's called the manistration, like menstruation. But then obviously the English dub like fucks it over and changes it to some like magic release ceremony or some bullshit, and it's like cowards is all I have to say about that. So we're gonna call it the manistration, because that's what it's called in the Japanese original, or that's like kind of like the translation of it. Anyway, and so they've been doing this manistration, and it's supposed to last for a couple more days, and then it's supposed to like ease off, but it's just like all this like ice magic and whatnot. It's just like taking it out, and if he was to like blow it up for realsy, it would like destroy everything. So then at that point, Subaru gets like a good idea. He's like, wait a second, I got an idea. We should throw a snow festival. And so he does this whole snow festival, invites all the people in the village. They come over, they're super excited about it, and they have a contest where everyone builds like snowmen essentially, or they do like snow sculpture contest. And then Roswell, him, and one of the guys from the village are like the judges. And then so we get like a whole scene with that, and it's all pretty lighthearted and like fun and stuff. And so like Beatrice and Amelia make statues of like Puck, and they get like out of 30 they both are under 10, like 7 and 9. And then Rem and Ram get into an argument about what they should do a statue of, because Ram wants to do Roswell and Rem wants to do Subaru, and so they make like a combination, and so they also get scored poorly. Like Subaru is like, I give you a 5 out of 10, and they're like, like what about you, Lord Roswell? And he's like 4. And then someone else is like, wow, this is really creepy looking. And then there's a girl, one of the kid girls, she ends up winning. She makes like a little bunny statue thingy, which is like super adorable, and then Subaru like turns it into like a mech or whatever, and that's what she wins with. And then the prize is like, it's because he had all that food and stuff from like when he was in the convenience store in Japan, so it was just like Cheetos or something. It was like corn puffs, right? So yeah, it was like, or Cheetos, are they corn or are they rice? I think they're corn. But I don't think they're cheesy. They're just like regular corn puffs, but they're like super delicious to this world, right? It's kind of like the Dr. Stone, where it's like the way we make food is like so ridiculously like overindulgent that compared to like how people made food like hundreds of years ago, it's like the food is trash. Unless you're just like having a steak, because like even salt and pepper and stuff that we like take for granted was like a rare commodity to a lot of people like hundreds of years ago. So that's pretty funny. So they have a successful event there, and then they move into the house, and at some point Ram and Subaru are like cleaning up the house, and they find like Roswell's like grandmother's or mother's like stash of like old wine and alcohol. And so at this point they're having like a little post-game party where people are drinking and they're like eating a big feast and talking about how great it was and how fun it was and all this stuff. And then at some juncture, I think this happens later. Okay, yeah, so we, Subaru's 17, so he never drank. Amelia's never drank because Puck wouldn't allow it. Beatrice doesn't drink because her mom doesn't allow it, and Ram doesn't drink either. So the only people that drink are like Ram and Roswell, but then Roswell convinces everyone to drink, and so Subaru has a little bit and he's fine. And then Amelia has a little bit and she gets like fucking hammered like a sorority girl. Like she's like all over Subaru and like giggling and smiling and falling asleep. And then Rem is exactly the same way. And so they kind of like pass out on each other and they're like feeling each other up. And Subaru's like, holy shit. But then he sees Beatrice outside by herself. So he goes and chit chats with her for a little bit and like toasts with her. And she's like, And then they see that it's kind of snowing and it's very pretty and beautiful and all that stuff. And so Puck, like all the girls and Puck and Subaru are outside. And then Puck's like, I'm going to share this with the Capitol. So we get like a little song, and there's like snowing in the capital, and we see all the characters that we have yet to meet, because again, this came out after the first season, so it's all a bunch of characters I'm sure we'll meet in the first season, and then that have yet to show up. So okay, so they do that, and then we get some kind of funny commentary from Roswell's just sitting inside, and so Beatrice goes, and they like talk back and forth a little bit, and Roswell's always seems to got something going on. Oh, and we also find out at some point that Roswell and Puck, when Roswell first went to get like Amelia to bring her into his house to like help her become like the next king or queen, is that him and Puck had a battle for like 2 days, and it like reshaped the whole like area, like reshaped the forest they lived in. And like they had to like redo the maps of the area because it was so crazy. And then because one of them's like, we could just fight and get it out that way, and Subaru's like, that's kind of extreme, let's not do that. Anyway, so yeah, and then the snow melts like the next day because Puck got enough of his magic out and all that stuff. It's good stuff. And then Amelia's getting ready for her date, and Puck says some like really shady shit to her. She's like, oh, it'll be so exciting to do this again next year. And then Puck's like, yeah, if Subaru's still around next year. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, is he even going to want to be around you next year? Like, it's all your fault. He has all these like scars and stuff. And he doesn't say it in a mean way, but it's very like dismissive, almost like it's very kind of fake, which makes sense. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like it's completely out of character. So I'm like, am I missing something? Anyway, she doesn't seem too bothered by it. Like, I'm more bothered about it than she is, so I guess that's on me. And then she heads out for her date, and that wraps up the snow memory. And then Chapter 12 of ReZero here, or Episode 12, begins kind of like the selection arc, I want to say. It's definitely like a total change of pace. Once again, Subaru's like revitalizing powers are like nowhere to be seen under any circumstance, so that was fun while it lasted. I'm sure they'll come up eventually, I guess. Anyway, Subaru and Amelia are just like having a walk. They're hanging out in the village, talking to people, like having a good time and whatnot. And then it finally comes that there's like a summons to the capital for Amelia. This occurs when this night cat guy, who looks like a woman, or has like a really high-pitched voice and dresses like a girl, of course. He's definitely a dude. He rolls up to visit Amelia and Roswell and stuff, and there's like Butler guy, and it's a Butler guy from Iskai Quartet. I was like, oh, okay, this is where he comes from, got it. And we find out at some point in this episode that he's like some demon swordsman or whatever. So Subaru chats with him a little bit because he's not invited to like the discussion with Amelia, and Amelia really starts kind of pulling away from Subaru in this episode, which continues forward. And so Subaru talks up this guy, and they have a little chat, and he talks about how he's like kind of pretty much in love with Amelia, and that she's the most wonderful, beautiful woman in the whole world. And then he mentions the butlers. He's like it's like he says something about like his wife or something, and the demon guy's like, yes, I see what you mean, that makes sense. And then the cat lady, the cat boy, who Subaru thinks is a woman because the voice actress is a voice actress. This is not like a trans thing or anything. It's literally like a woman. It's like what's his name from Fate? Oh fuck! Which one was that? It was the Fate one with the boy who dresses and has long hair and acts like a woman, but is not trans at all, or even gender dysphoric or anything. It's just like that's just like what he does. He just enjoys himself. Anyway, so they head out, and then we find out that knight is like the greatest magic user or water magic user out of all the knights in the whole kingdom or something, and is the best healer, and that he was actually enlisted by Amelia and Roswell to come heal Subaru when he was like severely injured at some point, and that they're going to go to the capital, and that Subaru's going to come specifically so he can like thank Flint and Rom and the Apple guy and Reinhardt and everything for all the help they gave him, and also to rest and to get further healing from the knight. I forgot the guy's name. Anyway, and Subaru's being Subaru, and so he comes out, and Rem comes too, and so does Roswell, and they all take like a ride out there in a carriage, and then Amelia's like super upset because he's having too much fun. Essentially, she's like a Debbie Downer in this situation. He's got to take things more seriously. She's also got this really like cute cat cloak thing. Just like, why? To sell merchandise, you dumbasses. That's why. Come on. Anyway, so they go look around, and they're not able to find anybody. They run into Julius, and this is a purple-haired knight who seems to have romantic intentions for Amelia, and so that makes Subaru like so jealous he like loses his fucking mind in this episode and the next. And then they instantly do not get along. Anyway, so Amelia goes inside to do something with like a mirror communication or something, and then Subaru sees this woman being like taken into this alleyway, so runs over to help, and it's the goons from like the first series, the first arc, and there's like this sexy blonde chick with like a fan who's clearly a noblewoman, and so he pulls this act where he's like, come on baby, let's go, get out of here, and she's like, please do not touch me, commoner, and he's like, come on, it's an act, we're supposed to do this, get out of here, and then he like threatens to call Reinhardt for these goons to like get out of there, and they're kind of like they're like, I don't know, maybe we should leave. And then Rom shows up. Hey, it's Rom, he's doing all right, old man Rom, and he's like, Subaru, what's up, homie? And the other guys are like, fuck, get out of here. And so they take off, and he asks about Flint, and Subaru's like, I don't know where Flint is, to be honest. She went off with Reinhardt, but I don't know where he took her. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna look around some more. So then he leaves. At that juncture, this knight, who's like the knight of this lady, and also Amelia, come walking around to the alleyway, and they see them. Then Amelia kind of grills Subaru about what's he doing with her, and he's like, oh, it's just happen chance, I saw her, and yada yada yada. And I got essentially bored of just sitting at her waiting, because he said it'd be like 5 minutes, and it was like forever. Anyway, I'm trying to remember the episode's break, but okay, so at this juncture, Amelia takes him back to... And she's like super concerned. She keeps bringing up like, I have to worry about you so much. You're always doing crazy shenanigans. Like, I need you just to like chill the fuck out and get better. Like, I don't need you to be like constantly trying to save me or getting yourself involved with all these like shenanigans and whatnot and constantly being in danger. And he's like, no, I do it for you. And she's like, no, don't do it for me. I want you to stay here. I want you to trust me, and I want you to please just stay here with Rem and enjoy yourself. And he's like, okay. And then she leaves. This is like the next day when they're supposed to go to like the selection appointment or committee or a meeting or whatever, where they have all the wise men and all the knights and stuff. So the essentially Subaru gets Rem to tell Subaru gets Rem to tell him where Amelia has gone so that he can like follow, and also she pretends that she's like busy cooking so that he sneaks out of there. She has nothing to do with her, right? So he heads out. He gets to the castle, and he's trying to figure out how to get in, and so he decides he's just going to like hitchhike. And so the first carriage that pulls up is obviously the woman he met yesterday, who's like some sort of like crazy psychopath who thinks she's like or narcissist. She's like the queen. She thinks she's already the queen because she's a member of like the selection, right? So there's like her, Amelia, and then we meet like the other three in a minute. Obviously Flint is going to be one of them if you know anything about stories whatsoever, but that comes up in a little bit. So where are we at here? Okay, yeah. So then they pick him up and take him inside, and she's like super fascinated by this whole situation, but like also doesn't care. And then the knight looks creepy as shit. He's just like is wearing a helmet and like some like furs over his shoulders, and then he has got like no shirt on, so you can see his like abs. And he's wearing like shorts. Like he looks super sketchy, and he's kind of a funny guy. He like chit chats with everybody and like says funny things. So they head in there, and then Amelia sees that Subaru's there, and she's super pissed off. She's like, "What are you doing here?" And then other people are like, "Who is this motherfucker?" And then Rouse was like, "Oh, he's one of my assistants. He's Amelia's something." And they're like, "All right, whatever. You go over there." So then he heads over there with like the other knights, and there's a whole crew of knights. And Reinhardt's there, and he's like, "Oh, hey, buddy, what's up?" And he's like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, I got you're here. That's fun. I figured you'd be here somehow because crazy nonsense." And then so there's a purple-haired girl wearing like Russian winter clothes, and then this like militaristic-looking lady with green hair, and I guess they're the others. And so we get in, all the wise men come in. There's like an announcement that like the purple-haired girl and gray-haired girl start talking about how this is like a waste of their time because there's not even like a 5th selection yet, and there's got to be 5, and that whoever gets selected is going to be like the dragon's priestess because the dragon like rewrote the contract essentially. So they got to figure that out. And so it's like, okay, what's going on? And then Reinhardt's like, I am ready. I have found the 5th candidate. And so he brings in Flint, and she's all dressed pretty, and she's like, I don't want to be here. What the fuck's going on? I want to do this. And then they're like, who's this crazy woman from the slums? Reinhardt, you've like disgraced your family. And he's like, no, behold. And he puts like a token in her hand, like the one that she stole from Amelia, and it lights up, and everyone's like, and it's like, here, there it is, the dragon's blessing or whatever. And then it's like, she's like, I don't want to do this. I want to fuck out of here. And it's like, you withdraw? And she's like, I do. And then something about him, it sounded like Amelia was like wanting to withdraw or something. And there's like some argument about like, because all the other candidates are like announcing themselves and who they are, and it's like spoiled rich girl, crazy bureaucrat, then there's like narcissist girl, and there's Amelia, and Amelia's about to go, and then Subaru says something about being her knight, and then him and Julius like get into it about being knights, and Subaru's been a real asshole to everybody essentially, and just kind of being a dipshit. And so he says the knights are like not that important, and then Julius was just born into the knighthood, and that makes Julius like even more pissed off. And then they argue about that for a little bit. And then finally Amelia announces herself. And there's like some conversation about her being like a devil that would make Subaru angry again. And he yells stuff out. And we get a couple shots of Roswell like grinning, like overly pleased with himself. Like he's so pleased that Subaru's here. Clearly there's some shenanigans going on his end with that whole business. But he loves it. Anyway, and so the Roswell is like sponsoring Amelia, and then all the rest of the ladies have like a night. So then the cat guy is with the green-haired girl, Reinhardt's with Flint, Julius is with the rich girl, and then obviously like Sketchy Knight is with the blonde chick. Okay, and then at some point Amelia like drags Subaru out and like tosses him out, and like you can tell she's super pissed off, and then Rom at some point like he rushes in, does like a smoke attack and tries to like rescue Flint, but then he gets jumped and they're gonna execute him, and then Flint's like, don't do that, and they're like, why? You've already like declined, you have no power here essentially. And she's like, fine, if I stick around and do this selection and this guy's like my fan, he's like my grandpa, you're gonna not kill him. And they're like, deal. And she's like, fine, fuck it. And then Reinhardt's super pleased and Rom's like smiling, and she's like, you guys set this up, assholes. And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, after all this, Reinhardt, Cat Knight, and Julius are meeting up with Subaru in like this antechamber, and the Julius is like, I need you to come with me right now because we got to settle some shit. And then Subaru's like, fine. So he takes him to like a coliseum, and all the knights are watching. And then Reinhardt's like, Julius, you really shouldn't do this. You're gonna kick his ass. It's like, this is embarrassing. Like, just ignore him. And he's like, no, he disgraced the knights. This is a battle to the death. But because he's like the knight of like Amelia, it's gonna be wooden swords. And then Subaru's like, let's do this. And then he's getting his ass handed to him. And then like another just random guard knight rolls into like the selection room where the ladies are just like hanging out with the wise men. Not like, it seems like they're just like waiting for something to happen. And then he announces that Julius is beating the shit out of Subaru, and no one cares except Amelia, who's super pissed off, and so she runs over to stop it. And then at some point, Subaru tries to like, Amelia gets there and says something, so Julius turns his head, and then Subaru's like, now's my chance. And so he rushes Julius and gets his ass handed to him. And then he wakes up in a room because he's not dead. He didn't get killed because Julius wasn't going to kill him because he's a knight. So good for him. And then Amelia's there, and she is livid. So she just like rails into him about him being selfish and doing things for himself, and how he broke his promise, and like she can't trust him anymore because he said he was going to do something and he did the complete opposite. And that she's going back to the manor with Roswell, but he's staying here and he's not coming back with them because she can't trust him. And then he starts going off about like all the things he did to help her and whatnot. And she's like, you did, so we're done. Like I forgive you, or like we're even. Like after all this shit, like whatever. And then she kind of like leaves, and then he's like distraught laying there. And that wraps up episode 13. So with Subaru stuck at the Capitol hanging out with Ferris or Felix, I don't know, I heard both names, I'm assuming it's just the same. And his master, green-haired lady, Krush, I want to say, he gets to spend a lot of time hanging out with the butler, the demon swordsman butler, practicing swordplay with a wooden sword, and he gets his ass kicked continuously. And at some point, the butler's like, I can't sit here and keep fighting with you when you really don't want to learn anything new. Called him out. Shit. Anyway, Subaru's still being a little bitch about Amelia and everything, thinking about that. Rem and him are like wandering around town. Eventually, he's out there buying apples from our apple buddy, our apple bro, as I will now refer to him as. And they're looking at like posters with all the names of the girls that are going for the queenship and whatnot. And someone makes some comment, I think it's Apple Bro, makes some comment about Amelia, like there's no chance in hell she's going to win because she's like related to the witch. And then him and Subaru get into like an argument about it, and then everyone gives him a dirty look. And since Subaru's being a little bitch right now, he everyone kind of like pushes past him, and he's like super upset, and he's like being a crybaby about everything and whatnot. And then that evening, the cruise lady is like, hey, come have a drink with me. So they go up to like the balcony, and they like chit chat about stuff. She talks about like marriage proposals and how she's trying to do all this other stuff at home. And it seems like she doesn't care so much about being the queen necessarily. Like it's like, yeah, I want to do it because it gives me and my family more power, but it's not like necessarily the end of the world, or, it's like whatever. I think she was the one, I didn't mention this before, but when everyone was announcing their like intentions, Amelia's like, I want to help the people. Flint was like, I want to get rid of the nobles like, altogether and like rebuild the kingdom from scratch. I think this lady was talking about something about giving rights to the people as well. And then purple-haired lady was talking about money. And then blonde lady was talking about being a monarch, like a sovereign monarch, or God, what do they call it? There's a term for it. Anyway, she has like sole authority in the land. All right, so after all that business, at some point, Felix comes up, gets all butthurt about stuff, and then somewhere along the line, I think the next day he's like fighting with the guy again, and then Rem comes running up, and she's like, I felt something from Ram. Something bad is going on over there. And then Subaru's like, we gotta go. And so they have a meeting with like Krush and Felix about it. And Krush essentially says, hey, if you leave, you're my enemy, and I won't protect you, and like what happens happens. And then he gets mad and like yells at her because he's a bitch. And then him and Rem like take off anyway, and he thanks the butler for all this stuff and whatnot. It's still going to take like 2 days to get back over to the castle, and you know they get to hotel that night. He can't sleep. Rem can't sleep. She comes in and casts some some sleep spell on him, so he crashes out. So when he wakes up the next morning, she's gone, and so he goes around town trying to find someone else who can take him over there. And finally, he finds this guy named Otto. I don't know if he's ever going to be relevant again. He's like relevant here. He takes him like halfway there, or like most of the way there, and then Subaru heads out. And he's like running up to the castle, and he gets surrounded by these dudes in like cloaks, and they're super sketchy looking, and then they just like bounce out. He gets to the town, everyone's like been killed and dead. He gets to the castle, he finds Rem, she's been killed, and then he finds Ram and Petra, the little blonde girl who's like the main girl character that all the boys have crushes on. And she's dead with Ram, and then she gets to Amelia's room, and everything's like frozen, and then his face gets like frozen and falls off, like half his head, and you hear Puck's voice being like, "You're too late, Subaru," and then he gets resurrected, obviously. So he's back with the Apple Bro and Rem, and he is like completely stunned, in that he's completely stunned. Yeah, he's completely stunned, in that he is like. Cannot move. He's just like he's in shock. That's the word. So he's in complete shock. And so then Rem's like, I'm going to take him back because he keeps saying like Rem and Ram and Amelia. And so maybe that'll be helpful. And Krush and Felix apologize for not being able to do anything. Like physically he's fine, but mentally he's like all turned up. So they head back. And then at some point, the carriage gets like knocked over, and it's like the witch hunters, and so Subaru's just laying there all zonked out, and then Rem fights these guys, and then they grab him, Subaru, and run off. And then he wakes up, and he's in this like cavern, and there's this guy who announces himself as like a bishop of the witch, and it's like, I think he said lust, like Bishop Belgraze of lust, like the sin of lust, but then he keeps talking about sloth, but then he also talks about love. So I was kind of confused, and I guess we'll just get more clarity on that later, because I wasn't paying enough attention while I was watching it, because it just came across like real quick. So it's either like the bishop sin of sloth or lust. I know it was a sin of something. Anyway, so he's like, this guy's like completely insane. He's like saying stuff real fast. He keeps talking to guys. He like screams at one guy for being slothful. He talks about like a dragon and something else about like dragon this, dragon that. And then he asks about the girl, which is Rem. And then Rem shows up, kills some dudes, tries to fight him. The Bishop of Sin like beats her, like hangs her up. And then Subaru like loses it and tries to break free of his like manacles, and the guy's like, ooh. He brings up like the gospel. At some point he calls Subaru Pride. He's like, are you Pride? And Subaru's like just staring, and then the guy calls him out. He's like, you're just pretending to be crazy. You're not really crazy. I can tell, because you keep like you're putting on a performance, and I can tell you're doing this to like for other people. And it's like facts. Anyway. So then Subaru finally like gets out of his manacles and picks up Rem after all the witch hunters are gone, and then he heads back to the village, and then he sees Ram in like a different position than his like previous reincarnation, and there's a whole bunch of dead witch hunters or witch cultists or whatever wandering around, or dead bodies all over the place. And then as he's like approaching the castle carrying Rem, he sees it's like all wintry and snowy and stuff, and then this like giant wolf creature like pops out of the Marquise's mansion, Roswell's mansion, and he says something about like my daughter is dead, or like something about my daughter, and then it freezes Subaru completely, and then we just get the credits roll, and we get this like really sad song. So this might be like the season break episode, even though it's like episode 15. I think there's only 25 episodes. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but you know, anime, sometimes they just like fucking have these things. So it's like this very like poignant point, and then after the credits, the Subaru wakes up, and he's back with like Apple Bro and Rem back in the capital, and he takes Rem's hand and starts walking, and then she makes some comment about him smelling stronger of like the witch than he did before, and he's like, let me hold your hand, I'll make you feel better, and she's like, yay. That wraps up episode 15. Following the mid-season break, we're back at it. So this time, Subaru immediately goes to green-haired lady with Rem, and they talk to the butler a little bit. They meet this merchant guy, which may or may not be important, but apparently he's some big shot merchant doing stuff around. Anyway, he goes and begs Felix and Lady Crotch, something like that. Anyway, green-haired lady. For help, and she calls him out for being selfish, and there's a whole thing where it's like he's telling her about the witch hunters, like, and she's like, well, I believe you because I know I believe you believe what you're saying because I can tell when someone's lying because of hand wavy bullshit. And then and so she's like, you're just being completely selfish. Not once in this entire conversation did you ever say you were trying to save Amelia. You're just trying to kill these witch hunters, kill whatever. And so he gets sent away. Rem like apologizes. They go out. He talks to Rem about how they need to get back like immediately to save Amelia, and he believes her. So they split, or no, Rem believes him. So they split up. She's going to go ask the knights for help, and he is going to go ask another one of he's going to go ask like crazy blonde lady. So he goes over there and starts talking to her, and she's like, ooh, if you crawl on your hands and feet and lick my feet, I will help you. And he's like, okay, done. So he does it, and then she's like, you disgust me. And she starts like kicking him and whatever, and then she orders her like funny knight fella who keeps calling Subaru brother to come take him away, to kill him. And he's like, I'm just going to take him outside instead. And so he does. They chit-chat a little bit, and then Subaru goes and finds Rem, and Rem's like, well, they can't help. All the knights are gone. They went to go do something away from the capital or something. So that includes Reingard, or whatever his name is. And so now what are they going to do? Well, they just got to find transportation. So then he's looking around, and he bumps into... before he runs back into Rem, he bumps into this like little cat lady girl who's looking at him. She's like, oh, you're bleeding in your face. That's funny. And then Hoshin shows up, or whatever her name is, the purple-haired lady. Maybe she's Hoshin, or she like works for her family's Hoshin, or the Hoshin Corporation. Anyway, she invites him to a meal. At the meal, she like interrogates him without him realizing it, and then she like writes down. He's like, I just need a carriage, and she's like, oh, I got a carriage for you. If you take this, you'll get like a dragon carriage or whatever. But first, I just want to chit-chat with you for a little bit. And so, because Subaru's an idiot, he reveals, like, all the stuff about what's going on at the green-haired lady's estate. And the purple-haired lady's like, oh, thank you. I needed to know all that information. And then she tells him some stuff about, like, all the iron being bought up and lots of merchants. And there's, like, weapons movement. And he's like, is there a war? And she's like, I don't think it's anything that crazy. But something is going on. And the information you gave me is super important. And then Subaru gets mad again because he's a child and doesn't know how to deal with people confronting him with how stupid he is. And so he gets into an angry posture, and the little cat girl, who apparently is like the number 2 person in her whole army and like a super powerful warrior of some sort, comes up and like threatens him, and then they all leave. And so Subaru's all messed up. Like, he's all messed up these entire 2 episodes. Granted, he's acting like very irrational and very angry, and he is being very selfish. Like, he's getting called out on being like bad at negotiating, bad at trying to see other people, just being selfish. The whole episode's called like greed, like pig like a greed like a pig, or greedy as a pig, or something like that. And it's just because he's so self-centered and so self-focused. It's kind of the message of this little arc inside the bigger arc, is that Subaru is not doing things for the right reasons, so that's why he's not having success. He's not like taking the time to think things through and whatnot, and that comes through, and people keep calling him out on it, except Rem, who is what is it, enabling him in his bad behavior. Anyway, so they get the carriage, they head out, they meet with Otto again from like a previous episode, who's first time for him. And we're given a lot of information this episode that I feel like is probably relevant either in the light novel, or at the bare minimum in the light novel, but perhaps it'll be relevant later on in the anime. But for episodes 16 and 17, which we're watching here, which are kind of like a combination before he dies, it is irrelevant. So, okay, yeah. So we learned about this oil. There's like oil he bought out of season, and then they start going on like a little journey, and he ends up like hiring all the merchants because he wants them to come to the town and rescue the people. And so they start going, and they're looking at a map and talking about that, and he uses his cell phone to light it up, and they're like, oh, we learned about like Fliggle's tree, which is some giant tree with some hermit that created it to like do something, and then all of a sudden, like the guy who was like next to him talking to him, it like disappears, and then Subaru's like, "Hey, what happened to that bandana guy?" And Odo's like, "What bandana guy?" And Rem's like, "Yeah, what are you talking about? There's no one over there." And he's like, "Huh?" And then we see a giant eye, and it's the white whale. I remember someone said something about the white whale in an earlier episode. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the white whale apparently, when it kills people, they like disappear from the consciousness of everyone around them. So that's interesting, and it's clearly hunting Subaru because Subaru's got like the taint of the witch or whatever. And so they start running away from it, and it's the white whale's like chasing them specifically. Then at some point, Rem's like, "I have an idea. I'm going to distract it. You guys keep going." And Subaru's like, "No." And so Rem like knocks him out, and then he wakes up later, and it's just him and Odo, and then he's flipping out, and he like punches Odo, and is like, "We got to go back and save her. We got to save Rem." And then Odo's like, "Who's Rem? What are you talking about?" And he's like, that blue-haired girl that you just said you were so grateful that she saved you." And he's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so he like, Odo like pushes him out of the cart and keeps going, and then Subaru's like gonna get eaten by the white whale, and he's about to die, and he's like begging not to die, and then he doesn't die, and he's just staring up at the moon, and then so he starts walking, and he runs into Odo's cart, and Odo's gone, so Odo's clearly dead. So he gets in that, rides to the village, all the kids are there, they're like, "Hooray!" He's like, "I made it on time," and then he passes out. He then wakes up and thinks he sees Rem, but it's really Rom. And Rom is like, "Oh, what are you doing here? Like, I know something bad happened, something, but like something." And then he's like, "I'm so sorry about your sister, Rem." And she's like, "Who's Rem?" And he's like, "Rem, your sister." And she's like, "I don't have a sister." And then he like describes like the event where they were like saved by Rem previously. And she's like, "No, that was you. And then me and Roswell took care of the rest." And he's like, "No, let's go." And he takes her to her room, and there's nothing in there. And he's like, "Wait a second." And he's losing his mind. Then eventually he goes to see Amelia. And he has another breakdown like he did in the Capitol, where she's like, "You need to calm down. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's going on?" And he's like, I can't tell you something. And she's like, "Well, yeah, if I can't, you can't tell. Like, I don't understand what's going on." And he's like, "That's it. I'm going to do it. I don't care what happens to me. If I die, I die." And so then he starts telling Amelia about his like resurrection powers or whatever. And then we see like the dark hands going up to grab his heart. And right before it's about to squeeze his heart, it stops. And then he's like, "Oh, I didn't die. That's great." And then Amelia's like bleeding out of her face. She's dead, and he's like just laying there holding her, crying. And then Beatrice walks in after like a whole afternoon. It's like, you know, he sees her, and then it's like the sun is setting much later, and she's like, and he's trying to, and she's like, "What have you done here?" And he's like, "I didn't do anything, something. And she's like, "I don't care, you can't be here." And so she teleports him like out of there, like kicks him out of there, and is like very sad about the whole situation. And then he's in the woods, and he's trying to take care of Amelia, and then he gets attacked by Beltagis, who's like, "Oh, you did my job for me. Oh, I'm so happy." And then he does something with like the dark evil hands, whatever, the same ones that like grabbed his heart. I think they're not the same hands, but they look the same in the anime. So, and then Subaru like notices it and like steps away from it, and then the guy like completely fucking loses it, because like, "You see my hands? You will die. I'm gonna tear this woman to pieces, and then I'm gonna tear you to pieces," and something. And right as he's about to do that, they get attacked with like a huge rain of like icicles, and it's Puck, and he's pissed as shit, and he's like, "What have you done to my daughter?" And it's like, "Ruh-roh." And so no one dies at the end of this episode 17, but the assumption is that someone will die very quickly, or is going to be dead by the time the next episode comes. So the battle between Puck and Beltagis goes pretty quick. Beltagis tries to fight Puck. Puck beats the shit out of Beltagis, transforms into his giant wolf form. After Beltagis is dead, he calls Subaru out. Apparently Subaru broke 3 promises. One was like keeping Amelia alive, one was staying in the capital, and I never recall the third. Anyway, he's super pissed, and so now he's going to destroy the world, because if Amelia can't be alive and he be with her, then the world needs to be destroyed. And so that's what he's going to do. And then Subaru gets frozen to death. This time, when Subaru wakes up, he's like distraught, and Rem's like something, and they go run it off. And then Subaru's like, "All right, Rem, I give up. We're gonna go to a different country, and we're gonna get married and have kids, and then be together, and then have a little cottage and something." And she's like, "No." And he's like, "What?" And then she goes on like this whole tirade about their future together, how she would love to like have babies, and one would be a son and one would be a girl or something. And then she just kind of goes on like this whole rant. But she's like, "But when you talk about this, you're not smiling. So I know that the Subaru I love would not be the one that I would want to be with." So this this whole episode essentially is just them going back and forth. Subaru talking about how he's a piece of shit. Rem talking about how he's her hero and how she loves him, and how Subaru actually loves Amelia, and eventually she gets him to like believe in himself because she believes in him so fucking hard, and friendship is magic. So with the power of her love and friendship, he's able to like pull himself out of his like depression from like feeling like he can't do anything to help Amelia and whatnot, and she's like cool with him loving Amelia because this is also like an erotic visual novel, so like so the women in it like don't care to share. They're like totally fine with it. It's so good. Anyway, I'm gonna take a pause from talking about the story for a second. I was talking to one of my guys that works for me about this because we were just chatting about Nikkei or something, and then I was like, so I'm watching this ReZero show, and he's like, oh, I love that show, and I'm like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, and I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of boring. Which, go ahead and put your hate in the comments below. But that's honestly how I feel. I'm like, it's alright, thus far. But he was telling me he's like, oh man, it's so good. It got me hyped up and all this stuff. And like, I like understand that on like some level, but part of it is like, I'm watching this episode and I'm like just bored. And like, I'm like, and then it like dawned on me because I was like, I could see why he would like this, or I could see why people would be very into this because they're like children essentially, right? And I don't mean that in a derogatory form, but like this is a shonen anime and it comes off as kind of like more mature-ish, but I'm like, I almost feel like this is less mature than like a Fairy Tale or Seven Deadly Sins or Dragon Ball Z, because the main character is such a child, and the stuff he's doing, it definitely exudes kind of that like middle school to like early high school level of like understanding of the world and like stuff like that. So I could I see why like if I was a teenage boy and I was watching this, I would be like, hell yeah, Demon Girl wants to be my wife, but she, all the stuff that's going on, I get it, but I'm like a tired old man. And so for me, it's none of it's bad, right? It's not like, oh, this is terrible. It's like so cringe, or it's kind of cringe, but as like somebody who's like lived a life and has a lot more information and just kind of like, I'm not even like a jaded person, but it's just kind of like, it's like, just grow the fuck up, man. Like, I don't know. Like, anyway, so he does finally grow the fuck up. So by the end of the episode, the whole episode is almost them just like talking back and forth. That's episode 18. So by the end of episode 18, Subaru is like, all right, I got a plan. I know what we're going to do. And will you help me? And she's like, first I'll help you. And they like hug it out and she's so happy and she's crying and he's crying. Everyone feels a lot better about the whole situation. All right, so then episode 19, we finally get back into like something more interesting for me besides just like a teenager complaining about how hard his life is and how he was like a shut-in and yada yada yada. Anyway, and so this time we like skip ahead a little bit. And so what happened was, at some point Subaru was like, all that negotiation stuff I learned in like the previous death scenes or whatever from like Hoshi and from Crouch and stuff, and all that information I gathered about the merchants and about this and about the white whale and everything. He's like, he put it all together because he's not retarded, that Crouch is gathering forces not to like start a war, but to kill the white whale, and that for somehow, and so he like makes all these negotiations and deals. He goes to Crouch with all this information. Hoshi shows up. The merchant shows up. Everyone like he like successfully negotiates to have her help Amelia and make an alliance with Amelia's faction. And he will give her information about exactly when the white whale will show up to help her and her like forces that are trying to gather together to destroy the white whale, And then the butler, who's like the new sword saint or whatever, we have a whole bunch of stuff about him. He was married to like the previous sword saint, and then he like took her last name so that he's a member of her family, like the Astoria line or something like that. And then she was killed by the white whale, and so he's been trying to get revenge on the white whale. And he has like a whole crew of like old men knights who like want to get revenge on the white whale. And then he connects with like the dragon from like previous editions, like the one that like the dragon like the chocobo dragon thingy. Anyway, so he makes negotiations. They all work out. Everyone's going to go do the white whale. He like remembered the time exactly when the white whale showed up because his phone like popped out of his pocket and he looked at the time in like the previous life existence. And so then the episode is just a lot of like him talking to the butler about his wife and how she was like married to the sword essentially, or the sword loved her, he kept saying, and that she eventually had to fight the white whale and died. And he's been, he felt like an embarrassment and a loser because he wasn't able to like defeat the white whale. And he just feels like he can't even go to his wife's grave until he takes care of the white whale business. So kind of like Subaru in a lot of ways, to be honest. And then they head out, and then he meets like everybody again. He meets like this werewolf guy we never met before, who's like part of Hoshi's faction. But he meets like her second in command's brother, who's actually the first in command, who's another like cute cat boy thingy. I'm trying to think if there's anything else really that relevant. A lot of it's just like prep, and then kind of like reiteration of stuff. So they go to the fugal tree. And then the time happens, and then they're all standing there, and then the whale shows up, and so it's like time to go, and it's like, all right, let's fight this motherfucking thing, and it's like hype, yeah, let's go, let's do this. Episodes 18 and 19 focus a lot on this shonen anime battle with the whale. It's pretty good. So the whale comes out. They start firing magic attacks at it. We find out that Krush has some sort of like sword art, which if you're not familiar with anime or JRPGs, a sword art is like a magical weapon attack. I think Dungeons & Dragons finally like integrated a lot of this in like 4th edition or whatever, where like martial individuals don't just like have like I attack with a sword, they have like special abilities. Anyway, so she does like some sort of wave attack. You've seen it 1,000 times if you've ever played like a JRPG or tactical RPG or any of this stuff. Anyway, so there's fight. Wilhelm gets up on the whale. He beats the shit out of this thing. He ends up like cutting the eye out and everything. The whole thing's pretty badass. Like all of episode 19 is pretty much just fighting the whale, killing the whale. At some point they get the eye out, and then it summons like 2 more whales, and everyone's like, fuck. And then Wilhelm is about to get eaten by the whale. It's all pretty good stuff. Like the show is very well animated. The action's fun. There's blood everywhere. People are getting killed. Oh, at some point the whale uses it uses like a mist attack, and we find out that, well, I was incorrect before when I just assumed when the whale killed somebody they get forgotten, but like the mist itself is like some sort of forget me capabilities or whatever. It also has this screech attack that it does, where people who have like, some people are affected because it like drains their mana or makes them something. It affects Rem to some degree and other people too. Felix runs around, he heals everybody. A lot of the battle is really Wilhelm and then the werewolf guy like jumping on the whale, cutting pieces of it off, fighting it, cutting its eye out, all this stuff. And then we that bleeds right into episode 20, which just continues the battle after the 3 whales show up. Like I said, Wilhelm gets eaten, and then Subaru and Rem keep fighting the whales. Everyone else is kind of shocked, and then Krush gets real mad. So then she's able to like rally a little bit, and they're able to, I can't remember, at some point they get Wilhelm out. Oh, during the whole both these episodes, a lot in episode 19, we get a lot of Wilhelm's past. So his wife, Teresa, who was like the sword saint, we get them like meeting, her talking about flowers, her saving his life at some point, him getting mad because she needs to be protected by him because she's a woman, which is based. Even though she's a better swordsman. But at some point, he finally like beats her in combat, and so he gets her to like stop being a swordsman, which is not wholly true because remember she got killed by the white whale, which is the whole reason he's here. But they like kiss it out, and she's like, she's like, do you love me? And he's like, you should know better than to ask such a dumb question. And she's like, yeah, but girls like to hear it sometimes. And he's like, I'll tell you someday. Like, he's such a fucking tryhard. Like, oh man, what an idiot. It's pretty good though. Again, this show is targeting its base, like light novels are targeting its base, which is like young men, like teenage boys, right? But it's pretty good. The music's pretty good. It's pretty hyped. Anyway, so they fight some more. And then Subaru and Krush talk for a little bit. He kind of figures out that the 2 of the whales are essentially like powerful illusions, so they can do damage and hurt and whatnot. But that if they can kill the original one, then they'll take care of it. The original one's like hiding up top, and then he gets a crazy idea. So like, all right, let's do your crazy idea. So then Krush, with that information, is able to like rally everybody finally to like start fighting. And then Subaru gets Rem to cast like some sort of like giant ice spear attack at the whale all the way at the top, and he rides it up, gets on there, and then he like, uses his like witch magic to force the whale to target him, and then he leaps from the whale to dive down. And the whale charges after him because these kind of like witch fiend creatures, they want to eat that delicious witch smell or whatever. And so he then Rem like shoots it with like another ice spike or whatever, and this one has like a chain attached to it. So then Subaru grabs the chain, or it was kind of hard to see. It was pretty dark, but so somehow Subaru and Rem and the dragon they're riding have the chain, and they start dragging the whale down, which is very impressive, because it's a giant fucking like monster magic whale. I know they drag it to the fucking ground, and then. Well, meanwhile, Krush and her crew have like blown up the Flugel tree or whatever it's called, and they time it exactly for the tree to crash down on the whale right as it's going by, and then fucking what's his name? Damn, Astoria. Wilhelm then Astoria. He comes up and he just like fucking murders the thing, and when he finally kills the whale with like his final like sword art attack or whatever, the other two whales disappear. And then there's like he's standing with like the sun rising in the background, and there's flowers, like the flowers that his wife loved, and he's like, I could finally fucking say it, I love you, and it's like all very emotional and like charged, and everyone's like cheering and happy. And then we get like the after effects. A bunch of people die. They got to take him back to the capital. Krush is like very appreciative. She asks Subaru if he wants to join her household. He's like, I'm gonna say no to that, and she's like, that's true. And then he essentially says that like she's number 3 on his harem list or whatever, because he's like, if it was just me, I definitely would join you, but like my heart belongs to at least 2 other girls, right? So it's like precious, which is Rem, and Amelia obviously is number 1, as he's already confessed. So they have a little chit chat. She's going to send some troops, including Wilhelm, who comes up and like thanks. Everyone's like thanking each other. It's a lot of glad handing kind of stuff. It's like, oh, thank you. No, thank you. This couldn't have done without you. No, without you, it couldn't have been done. No, only you could have inspired. It's like a lot of bullshit like that, but it's good stuff. So then, Wilhelm and I think Felix, and then the little girl who's in charge of Hoshin's like contingent, they're all going to go with like a 20 men to like fight the witch cult, and they talk about that for a little bit. I think werewolves coming too. And then he's like, oh hey, the rest of my troops that were like guarding the roads so that civilians didn't get involved in the white whale battle, they're coming too. And at the head of them is dun 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 Julius. What's he doing here? We'll find out right now in the next episode. So Subaru sits down with everybody, and they have a little meet and greet and chit chat about everything that's going to go on, their plan, the witch's cult, the connection between the witch's cult and the great white whale, and all that fun stuff that they're engaged with. So then they start heading off towards the village and whatnot, and Subaru and Julius, who wants to be called Jules because he doesn't want to be a mercenary or some silly thing. It's like some like very silly thing. Anyway, they kind of make amends somewhat. Like Subaru still has a lot of hate in his heart, but he apologizes for everything that happened in the capital, and Jules like thanks him for destroying the white whale and everything, and so they kind of come to like some sort of agreement on like the situation in which they both are involved with and feel okay about the whole situation. So then they head over to the witch's cult area, and they set up a trap for Betelgeuse. So they go and they kill one guy, and then they get Betelgeuse trapped so he can't go into like his temple by destroying it. And then Subaru like distracts him, gets him to talk about like the gospel again and all this stuff. And then while he's distracting them, Betelgeuse, what's his name? Astoria. I know I just said this, but Wilhelm. So Wilhelm comes and like cuts him in half from behind, and then they like blow the shit out of him to make sure he's dead. And Subaru is still kind of skeptical. He's like, I don't know, I can't believe he's like dead. That seems like way too easy. Something. And they're like, oh, okay. So then they head back and they find out like, so this guy has like 10 fingers that are like his, and then he has like 100 witch cultists or whatever. So 10 fingers, yeah. And so they killed some of the people. They got one of the fingers. They start hunting down the rest of the fingers. Then this lady then one of the invisible hands that Betelgeuse like uses for his main attack reaches out and grabs Subaru and drags him to a tree, and then there's some other cultists, and so we find out that the fingers can all be possessed by Betelgeuse after he upon his death or when he's about to die, and then he can keep going. So that becomes like a main thoroughfare for this like little part of the story, the arc, I guess. So he gets caught up by that, and then Julius uses some of his like spirit magic, because he's like spirit knight or whatever, to rescue Subaru, and then because of that they're able to get him killed, right? Okay, or get this lady that's possessed by Betelgeuse at this point killed. So then they fight some more, they clear that up, they head into the village with the merchants, and then it takes a little bit of like a rousing speech by Subaru to get the people to finally agree that they need to get the fuck out of here because there's some issues with like this is all the half elf's fault, Amelia. And then we find out because Ram shows up at some point and she's like super mad because Subaru sent like a letter that was like a declaration of war or something somehow because he's bad at writing and he's like, I'm not smart enough to like imply anything. Like what I wrote you is literally what I wrote you. Like we were coming to help you because the witch cultists were coming. And Ram's like, all right, I guess I believe you because you're an idiot. And it's like, oh, she's so sweet. Anyway, so then between Ram and Subaru in the village, they're able to convince the villagers they need to pack up and go. And then while Subaru's kind of helping with all that and they're talking about their preparations, what they're going to do and how Felix tells Subaru that he needs to like actually forgive Julius and like actually come to terms with him because they got to work together and be friends. Oh, at some point on their trip, they get attacked by some sort of like illusion magic or whatever, and then Subaru is able to like escape it with the help of Julius's like little fire spirit that he sent to protect Subaru because Subaru is weak as shit, which sure is nice of him. Anyway, so then he uses some sort of other spell to like communicate with everybody. He calls it like a net, like literally like the internet, so that everyone can communicate in their brains and they can all figure out they're an illusion and escape and whatnot. And for some reason it causes like Subaru to like have like a terrible headache and he's like, ah! And then Julius mentions that maybe he's got a strong affinity for spirits, which will probably come up later because thus far the show is very well written. So stuff that like gets brought up usually has like ramifications down the line thus far, which makes sense. I mean, it's based on a light novel, I'm assuming. So light novels tend to be pretty good because the person's like writing a book. So like they have a lot of space to like breathe and connect. So when they make animes of these shows, generally they're pretty well written, even if they're stupid. Like Sword Art Online, which is pretty stupid. This show's not like that unstupid, to be honest either. But it's fine. It's exactly like I feel about Sword Art Online. This is a little more exciting while we're on a tangent about it, because I just watched a video by somebody and they were like defending Sword Art Online or something, or saying that, I don't remember what they were trying to do. Anyway, but the point being is like there's a lot of hate for Sword Art Online because it like, for a lot of people, it was like the thing that brought the isekai genre into focus, which it's not an isekai, so I don't get where that comparison comes in. It's like completely devoid of that. But I've seen like 4 seasons of Sword Art Online, and it's fine. I got like that's how I feel about it. Like that 3rd and 4th season were kind of boring. The Alice arc or whatever, I was like super bored. But the Gungrave or whatever it's called, and then the first arc were kind of exciting. And his cousin's hot as shit, so fair enough. So anyway, back to ReZero. So at some point, Felix is like talking to him some more about talking to Julius and like actually coming to terms with him and not being like an asshole. And then he gets like really flirty with Subaru, which causes the merchant who owns the wagon that they're in to come in and be like, hey, you love birds, get out of here. And then Felix is like, gotcha, because this guy's actually dun he's a member of the witch cult. Oh no, he snuck in, he was a secret operative the whole time. And so she tries to interrogate him, but then he blows himself up. Fuck. Subaru wakes up later and Felix is wearing like a burlap sack. Cool. And then the village is like under attack, so they got a lot of the people out already, but some of the witch hunters or witch cult or whatever are still fighting people, and the knights are fighting them. And then we get Wilhelm, and then Julius and Subaru go to like help Wilhelm fight off this guy who tries to like stab him in the eye and then explode himself, and they're able to like protect him well enough. And then another one of these fingers shows up, and they're like possessed, so Julius starts fighting them. And then Subaru's like, take care of Wilhelm, I'll take care of this crazy bitch. And so he runs off, and the lady who's possessed by Beltegeese like chases after him, and eventually he finds one of the barrier crystals, and he grabs it, and then the guy's like, ooh, I got you now, and he's like, no, I got you. And all the spirit beasts or whatever they're called, the witch beasts, the witch fiends or whatever, they show up because he broke the barrier, and they're like, yum, 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 we love that witch smell. And this Beltegeese stinks of it and doesn't have a crystal, so they eat her up. And then he heads back out to the village, and there's like one more guy, and he's causing problems and fighting knights and killing people. And then Amelia shows up, and she's like, not on my watch. And so then they have a little icicle battle, and she finally destroys that individual as well. And then she starts crying, and Felix is like, hey man, you go talk to your woman, bro? And Subaru's like, yeah, I got this. And he goes up to talk to her because she's sad because all the people are still whispering about her, and she's very sensitive about being like the witch reincarnated, right? Which is like a sad thing. Which is still interesting, going all the way back to like episode 1. It's like, why did she tell him her name was Setella or whatever, the name of the witch, in the first place? That seems like very odd, considering how she responds to it like from thence forth. Anyway, so but then Subaru gets like a premonition, and he runs off into the forest. He's like, stay away from me, I gotta go. And then he runs, and then Julius and Felix like chase after him, and then dun dun dun, he's possessed by Beltegeese, and then Julius is like, "You gotta fight this, Subaru. Stop being an asshole. You gotta tell me what you're gonna tell me." And then Subaru and Beltegeese are going back and forth for control, and then Subaru finally gets control, but he's like barely holding on, and he's like, "You gotta kill me right now. Do it before something." And then Felix goes up to like kill him, and then Julius stops him. And then he's like, "What do you want me to do? I got to do this. Like, this is like the mission." And he asks us to do it. And then Julius is like, "I'll take care of it." And then he like stabs him. And Beltegeese is like, "No." So Subaru's back. But this time, he knows all about Beltegeese and all his like wiry ways. So then he's in the council. The save point is what he calls it, and that's pretty much what it is. So his autosave kicks in, and the autosave is right during like the little council meeting they were having after they killed the white whale, but before they went to find the witch hunter. So this time, Subaru knows like a whole lot more. He knows who's going to betray them. He knows about the explosion stuff. He knows about Beltegeese and the fingers and everything. So he's got pretty much all the information he needs, right? Well, most of the information. Anyway, so they come up with like this really sneaky plan. And then we flip over to Amelia, who's like taking a napopotamus, and she gets woken up and heard Pucker talking about stuff, and she's remembering like the day, and she's kind of sad about like the people rejecting her and whatnot. And then she's talking to Puck about it, and Puck's like, "Hey, you can do whatever you want. I support you 100% no matter what." And he brings this up a couple times, which is interesting. It doesn't really pay off in this season because we're going to wrap up this season here with episodes 24 and 25 is this little arc, the mini arc. The whole thing is like the Beltegeese witch hunter arc or whatever, or witch cult. Anyway, so then she gets some visitors. The visitors are Felix and Wilhelm, Ram, and a mysterious fellow who is unrecognizable, who is obviously Subaru. And so they kind of explain the whole situation to her about everything that's going on and get her on board with like being like, "All right, let's go." Beatrice, of course, is going to stay back because she's contracted to stay back and make sure everything's taken care of here. At some point, someone mentions like Roswell being okay with like the mineral rights transfer or whatever, which I don't remember that ever happening. But hey, whatever. I'm sure it's fine. So... So then we get her. She's, all the villagers are getting put away. Finally, Amelia gets told she's going to go with the kids. They're going to split up the villagers. They're going to take some to the capital, and they're going to take some to like a sanctuary that Ram's going to defend with some guards and whatnot. And then finally, Amelia agrees to go with the kids because they're like, "No, we love you. We want to hang out with you and go with you and whatnot." And so then they all head off. And then at that point, Subaru removes the cloak that Amelia wears often. That is like. That's the cloak that makes people not be able to like recognize you or whatnot, which is very useful for her because then she doesn't get called like an evil witch constantly because she's a silver-haired half-elf. Anyway, so at that juncture, Felix and Julius are talking to him about like the plans and what's going on, and they're kind of waiting for some more information. They kind of tease him about Amelia and whatnot and how he stole the cloak from her, and he's like, "No, I didn't steal it. I just like borrowed it or something. I don't know." Anyway. They come up, they went and killed all the 10 fingers, they cleared out everything, they kind of took care of everything, and they have everything set up for like his grand scheme to defeat Beltegeese. And so he heads off to do that. He goes and like does the whole thing where he's like, "I'm here to join you, Beltegeese," and like, yes, something. And finally he calls him out on his BS, and then Julius shows up, and so Julius and him start fighting, and they use net. So Julius can't see like the invisible hands that Beltegeese uses to fight, but Subaru can because he's like infected with the witch stuff. And so they use the net ability so that Julius fights with his eyes closed, and he's just watching through Subaru's eyes, essentially. So that way he can see the hands, and he's like, fight. It's pretty good, like, shown an anime battle, like, he uses, like, his spirit magic, and they fight, and he does this and that, and fight some more, and it's super fun. Eventually, he blasts the shit out of Beltegeese, and, like, knocks him against, like, a back wall. Beltegeese uses, like a stone shield or whatever, and then Subaru does something. I think he uses like the little fire spirit that Julius like entrusted to him to like blast it open, and then Julius goes in there and stabs him. And at that point, Beltegeese possesses Subaru, but then Subaru and him are like fighting because Subaru is ready for it at this point. And then he summons like the evil witch to like crush his heart by telling people about his abilities, right? His like little demon summoning thing. And then Beltegeese is in there, so Beltegeese is like, "Ooh, my love, I love the witch. I'm so happy to have you." And she goes and like touches his heart, and she's like, "Gross, no, you're not who I'm looking for." And he's like, "No," and he gets like cast out, and then Julius like stabs him. And then I think a bunch of like rocks fall on him, and he's like, "Phew, good thing he's dead." And it's like, is he dead though? I guess we'll find out. Anyway, And then we switch over to like Amelia, and then Wilhelm's like, "Oh, something's amiss here. I got to go take care of it. With your leave, my lady." And so he kind of rides off, and then Amelia's with the kids, and she's like, "Should I come help?" And he's like, "No, you stay with the kids in this cart." Meanwhile, back over at the village, they find out that there's at some point Otto, our friendly carriage driver, he gets like brought in as like a because he was just doing his own merchant thing, and he tried to sneak into the village to like sell the oil or something, and they caught him as like a spy. And it's like, oh, this guy's not a spy, he's a goof. Anyway, so they're meeting because they couldn't find like the explosives, like the TNT essentially, that was used to like blow up to all like the suicide bombing or whatever before, and then they finally figured out like where it's probably at. It's probably in like Kitty, I think they said Kitty or Kelly's carriage or whatever, and that's when Amelia's in. Oh no. And they're like, oh, we would have missed it if it wasn't magical, because we just searched magical stuff because we're idiots. And so if they had physically set it to like go off at some point, which I guess they did somehow with like all this time wasted, that it's enough TNT to like blow up like a whole city or a whole village and like ruh-roh. And so then Subaru, of course, starts freaking out because everything's been coming up like aces except for like this one thing, and he's like, "What should we do?" And well, he didn't say what should we do. It's like, I need to go, and it's like, well, a land dragon's not going to be fast enough to catch up because they're like an hour ahead or whatever, and like by the time this thing probably is going to go off, I don't know how they come up with this. Probably light novel explains it better, but they're just like there's a lot of like hand waviness in this part of the story where it's just like, we know that it's there because reasons, and we know that it's like on a timer for reasons, and that the timer is not going to give you enough time to like catch up for reasons, so it's going to go right to the capital and then blow up, presumably, would be my guess, right? But again, I've read the light novel, so I don't know exactly what the whole dealio is. That being said, Otto's like, well, I got an ability, so they strap like 2 land dragons, they Pontchartrain or whatever, Patricia or whatever, his land dragon, Subaru's, and then the one that Otto uses, and they're going to get in a carriage, and he's going to take like a shortcut and go super fast. And we find out that he has like this special ability where he can like sense animals or communicate with them in his mind, and so he can talk to like the bugs and the birds and the bees and whatnot, and they can give him information on like the shortcut path on how to get through the forest and whatnot. So they're speeding along and they're doing it, and Subaru's like, this is awesome, this is so easy. And Otto's like, there's nothing easy about it at all. They're like racing past bridges that are collapsing, and they're going down like cliff faces and like all this crazy shit. And then all of a sudden, guess who shows up? Da da da, that's right, Beltegeese. And he's some sort of like Resident Evil style monster at this point. he's like a more shadow than man with like a face that's like bleeding, and it's like crazy looking. Anyway, Subaru goes back to like argue with him, and he's like dodging out of the hand's ways and yelling at him, and then he blasts him in the face with his like fire spirit magic, and then he pulls out the gospel, which he got from him last time they killed him, or this, I mean, well, last time was the previous life, but in this, when they had like previously quote unquote killed him. And then there's like blank pages, which we saw before, so this is, again, it's all good writing. He's like flipping through the gospels, and there's some blank pages there. And if you remember, like Beltegeese kind of goes on and on about how the gospels, like everything comes true or something, and like how it's the predictions of the future, and like tells them exactly what they need to do and where they need to go. And so then Subaru, with like, it seems like his own blood, I want to say it's something red, but I assumed it was his blood, maybe it's Beltegeese's blood. He writes in the gospel something in Japanese, which is like, you are dead, or you die, or you go away, or something, I'm assuming, because then Beltegeese just like fades away and disappears for good, and it's like, thank God, hopefully you're dead this time for good, and presumably he is. Anyway, so then we get like some more super fun, so that's cool. These last 2 episodes are like all hype. Like the battle with Julius and Beltegeese is like shonen anime hype, like as in like it's fucking awesome. It's like a great shonen anime battle. And then we get some hype with this part where Subaru's just being a total badass. So all that like 3 episodes of him being a sourpotamus, I guess it's like this is the payoff for being like, I'm kind of annoyed at this guy, because now it's like, I mean, he's still kind of a dweeb, but like this part's super hyped, if you will. And so that's cool. And then he runs up to Amelia's cart because she's like talking to the kids. So like finally reveal that they're there because Subaru asked them to protect her, and they have to protect. And she's like getting all these flashbacks all the time to protect her, and she's getting like sobby eyed because women. And then Subaru jumps in, and he looks super heroic with like the shadow in the background. And he's like, hey, and he's like, oh wait. And so he tears up the bottom of the carriage, finds the bag with all the dynamite in it, and then he like goes to like run away with it. And Amelia's like, wait, and he's like, I gotta go. And so he races off to like the flugel tree because they've gotten that far, and he like is like, oh please be enough time so I don't have to die again. I'm so tired of dying. And then he goes and tosses it in like the flugel tree explosion that they'd already created, and then he starts racing back, and then boom, it explodes, and it's this giant like explosion, and it's like, hey, the land dragon Patricia or or whatever, like throws him on the ground and then covers him with her body. Oh, she's so good. So she's the true hero of the day. And then Amelia sees the explosion and is like, no. And so she like runs off towards the explosion. And then we get Subaru being like, oh, fuck, am I going to die again? Is that the witch hasn't come for me yet, but maybe she's coming. and then he's like, oh, wait, I hear her. And then it's Amelia and she's like, Subaru. And she finds him. And then he like passes out. And then he wakes up and it's like lap pillow time, obviously. Obviously, it's going to be lap pillow time, you degenerates. What else could be? Lord. Anyway, so he's super happy to be in the lap pillow time, and she's like rubbing his hair and like, aw. And then he confesses his love to her after they have like a funny conversation about just like random bullshit about where everyone's at. The land dragon. So don't worry, everybody. No animals were hurt in the filming of this anime. The land dragon's doing just great. She'll be back for more. And everyone else is like recovering who didn't get killed. Oh, I forgot to mention that the thing that Wilhelm was like all concerned about was that they were being hunted by like witch cultists. There's like a whole bunch of them just like around throwing fireballs at like the caravan. So Wilhelm and his like crew are like beating the shit out of them as they're trying to escape. So that's good. Oh, we also find out at some point that Beltegeese, when he's like having a conversation with a Subaru all the way back in like episode 24, because now this is like the end of the season, so it's like we're like at the end of episode 25. But back in episode 24, when Beltegeese is like, and Subaru is still being kind of like conniving, he reveals that the whole point of Amelia is that they're trying to get her to like force the essence of like the witch into the Satella into her, and if Satella like takes over, then like they win, and if she doesn't, they're just gonna kill her. And so then that makes Subaru super mad. But we find out more about that. And then when he gets like ignored by the witch, we see like some more of like the inner world, and we see like the shadow existence of the witch, and she's like, you're not who I want. So clearly she wants Subaru. So there's definitely going to be some like shenanigans with Amelia and Satella and Subaru at some point in a future version, like season, which I will probably never get to, because I think they've only translated like 2 seasons. I think there's 4 seasons in Japan. Some of those might be subbed. I don't know, but from my recollection, I only found 2, so maybe I'll look for some more later. Anyway, so then after we get some lap pillow time, and we get like, and then Subaru confesses his love, and then we get this whole like ridiculous emotional scene. It's very well animated, I gotta say. This is some of like peak animation here, with like him like confessing his love, like, and it's like a very close up shot of his face, and it's very detailed and excellent. And then her like crying and very detailed, and like a lot of emotions there. Like it's literally like a completely different studio did this portion, because like up to this point, it's like, yeah, the animation in this show is pretty good, at least in the first season, right? It's definitely some like Bones or UFO Table or like one of these like premier like animation studios is putting this fucking thing together, because it is like so good, and the fluid motion of the battles and everything, like it's super good. But this is like a whole nother level. So maybe it's the same studio, but it seems like a different style completely. Like Amelia does not look like Amelia in this section, and Subaru also looks slightly different. So it's kind of interesting that that's what they did. If that's what they did, I don't know. I'm not gonna look it up anyway. But then she's like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, don't worry, I'm going to make you fall in love with me. Obviously, she loves you, you dumb shit. Anyway, but he's like, I'm going to make you fall in love with me day by day and step by step and everything I can do. And he's like, you saved me. And she's like, I don't remember saving you. You've always saved me. And she's like, thank you for saving me. And they like smile and smile and smile and smile. And then the credits roll. And that's it of season 1. Oh, it's adorbs. So that was cute and that was fun. There's a movie that takes place between season 1 and 2 that I was going to do as part of this, but I feel like this season recap is already going to be like 3 hours long, so we're not going to do that. We'll just make that a separate video, but give you guys a break if you're following along. But yeah, I liked it. It went up and down, and at times I was very bored with what was going on, but it kind of redeemed itself here at the end. So as a grand picture of things, I'm like, all right, I get it. I liked it. It was pretty hype. It wasn't as like shonen-y as I prefer. It's definitely more of like the isekai sort of online kind of situation, and I definitely enjoy like the hype of like real shonen anime. I guess I don't know what to even call it, like Dragon Ball style fairy tale, where it's like every battle is like a one-upsmanship that gets more and more, gets like increasingly ridiculous, into a point where it's like it is like, what the fuck's going on? Oh man, I love that shit so much. But it's still pretty good for like an isekai anime, which I'm usually not that into, to be completely honest. But yeah, no, it's good, and I enjoyed it, and we'll see how season 2 holds up. So a lot of these shows, like I like Shield Hero, that's what it's called. I like Shield Hero season 1. It was pretty decent. I would give it like a 6 out of 10 for like anime generally, which is better than average, because I'm not IGN or whatever. So like a 6 out of 10 for me is like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's above average. I definitely enjoyed watching this. I'll definitely watch more seasons. And then I watched season 2, and I was like, yeah, I'm good. Season 2 was trash. It was like 4 or 3 out of 10, like not good. And then I hear like season 3 is slightly redeemable, and there's actually season 4 coming out. But again, it's like season 2 was so bad that I was like, I'm good. I have no interest in watching any more of this stuff. Like it was so boring, and I was so uninterested in what was going on. So there you go. There's that. I wish I'd make more Goblin Slayer. That show was dope as shit. But there's just the one season and then some movie that was never translated. Anyway, that's what I gotta say. ReZero, yeah, that's a recommend. It's pretty fun. You just gotta get through like some of that boring shit, and there's a decent amount of boring shit, to be completely honest. But the end hype was pretty good, so it gives me hope that the show's gonna turn it around. But yeah, there you go. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you in I'll catch you next week for the movie. I don't know what it's called, but yeah, cool. Catch y'all later. Bye.